Okay, let's go live. All right, going live, and we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gravity Max live stream. Today, I'm here with my co-host Sebastian. How are
Oh,
you today, sir?
I'm doing quite well. And yourself?
I am also doing quite well. Yeah, even though I'm kind of tired, but
Mm.
that is sort of to be expected at this point. So, no,
I'm gonna level with you right
yeah.
now. I've felt like I need to sneeze for the past like 4.5 minutes.
Okay, yeah, do it.
No, it's just I feel like I have to, but
Oh,
my
okay.
body's not doing it. I'm not
That's
willingly holding it back. I'm not that I don't have that kind of control over
Yeah,
myself.
that's an unfortunate situation. I'll admit that that is not fun. Um, but yeah, so we're here today to talk about different sorts of societies and how they might operate in the future, and maybe in the present if there are aliens. So yeah, that's what we're talking about today. It's the Kardashev scale. It's like a way of classifying societies. It's going to be interesting. So, first of all, let's get into the plugs. And yeah, okay. Visit the Gravity Max website at gravitymaxmedia.com. There's cool stuff there, books, stuff about other YouTube channels that you should follow, and also a little news page where the most recent article is from June. But some of the articles I would say are evergreen content. Some of them are there's like there's like seven of them. There was one week where I just felt like writing articles, I
Nice,
guess.
nice.
I think it was because basically there were some things where I was like, this is not enough to make into a video.
Hmm.
And it was also sort of like, I don't feel like filming a video. So I just want to write the script essentially. So if you want, you can go check those out. I might add stuff eventually to that. Also follow Gravity Max on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and Patreon. Links in the description will update you whenever things happen. So that's why it's useful to go there. Also follow Sebastian on social media at 128 seconds on Instagram and 128 seconds on YouTube. I would definitely recommend that you subscribe. You know, he makes quick educational content, 128 seconds long. I imagine most people watching this stream are already subscribed, like all the regular viewers. But if you're a new viewer, you should definitely subscribe to 128 seconds because basically you offer the counterpart to these long live
Hmm.
streams, like a quick, short, like briefly summarized version. So very useful, very informative. Links in the description below. Also, my book, A Bottle to Flame, link in the description. And I think I'll announce the next book soon, but
Nice. Looking forward to it.
probably probably next time. Next live stream, you're gonna see like a massive weight lifted off my shoulders because I'm taking the SAT on Saturday for
Yeah.
the second and hopefully final time.
Good
Um,
luck. Good luck.
yeah, thank you, my good sir.
Of course.
Uh, yeah, I'm hoping to get a good score on that. Um, but in the meantime, check out this book because there's another one coming out soon. Links to the Amazon, you can get it on Amazon. It's in the description. The next one's coming out soon, so you don't want to fall behind, right?
Yeah.
And also, uh, check out Govern Max. It's the second channel for this channel. It's unrelated pretty much. It's about
We
government.
need to make
So
a slide for that. The logo is heat.
oh yeah, we should probably we'll make a slide for that next time. But yeah, you should definitely check out that channel if you are interested in the operation of the government. It's just a good sort of update, helps you keep track. I like to focus on primary sources personally, so I use like I most of the videos on that channel are me reading a law or an executive order or a Supreme Court decision like directly from those government agencies. And I think that's important because a lot of the news is sort of like filtered through people's biases. And of course, you can't entirely eliminate that unless you become like a journalist yourself because you need to be able to gather all that information, and it's a full-time job. But to the greatest extent you can, the more primary sources you use for something, the better, because it gets you closer to the source, lets you directly interpret things. So that's sort of the goal of that channel. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can go check that out. But yeah, let's begin with today's episode. We live in a society.
We live in a society. So yeah, so today it's all about civilizations. We're talking about the Kardashev Scale, which I'm sure we've mentioned in a couple of other videos. It might not have been this season, but definitely in the past, because it's a scale mainly built for the future. We're gonna see where current day humanity is on the scale, and you're gonna see, oh, well, this is clearly built for the future, and it's a classification system for the future. And so yeah, we're going to get into what it means, how you determine your place on the scale, and then we're going to get into some additions that have been made to the scale, and then an inside look at what it would be like to live in each of the different civilizations along the scale.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's going to be an interesting episode. So yeah, should we just hop right into it?
I mean, we can. Let's do that.
Yeah. All right.
The
So
scale.
the scale. So the scale originally was not really a scale. It was more like a classification system, sort of like step ladders. Like there are 3 different things, and that's it. Nothing in between. But it became a scale, and the way that it became a scale was based on energy consumption. So this is a scale that determines the progress of a society based on how much energy it consumes. Now, you could argue that's sort of flawed because that allows for some variations in like how a society is operating, because a society could be using 10 times as much energy as we are, but if they have like 1,000 times the population, then really they'd probably be less developed than us, because all of those people are living in like less advanced conditions. So that's something to think about. But generally, the amount of energy at a society's disposal that it can coordinate and use together is sort of proportional to its power and level of development. So yeah. So let's start with the original scale. So the original scale, which was invented by Kardashev, I forget his first name.
I think it was Nikolai Kardashev. Not sure.
Oh yes, Nikolai Kardashev.
Nice.
Yeah, Soviet astronomer Nikolai Kardashev invented this scale in 1964. And so what it was just like, let's see. So he just made 3 classifications, as I said. And those were a planetary civilization, a solar or stellar civilization, and a galactic civilization. So all that's basically the difference here is that a type 1 civilization, a planetary civilization, is able to utilize the energy of an entire planet, presumably its home planet. A type 2 civilization is a civilization that is able to utilize all of the energy of its home solar system. And of course, when we say like saying home solar system versus home star is like a rounding error, because the sun is 98.9% the mass of the solar system, something like that, and a comparable share of the energy. So most of the energy that's going to come from like that's going to be used is going to just come directly from the star. And then type B, a galactic civilization, is a civilization that is able to make use of its entire galaxy in terms of energy consumption. And so that means, practically that means every star in the galaxy, although you could utilize like the interstellar gas, but that would be, yeah, I guess you could also. Just basically, if you were to run fusion reactors and take a ton of interstellar gas. Also, there's like dark matter and stuff that we don't really know what that is.
Mm.
Um, I'm not sure if dark matter was like confirmed in Kardashev's day, like if that was a common thing that, like if that was a consideration he made. Not sure, but
That's a good question. What was dark matter?
yeah, I'm pretty sure dark matter is a more recent thing. Like at first, the obvious conclusion on dark matter was sort of like, oh, our theories of gravity must be wrong, and some people
Yeah.
still believe that to be the case. Um, but
Yeah, it was so the first time that someone pointed out that the mass of all the stars wasn't like equivalent to what they would need to be, that there needs to be another element at
mhm.
play, was first inferred by the Swiss American astronomer Fritz Zwicky in 1933.
Hmm. Okay, so yeah, I guess it's not really considered much for the Kardashev scale because at this point we can't really interact with dark matter, and presumably there is like dark matter literally all around us. Like, not to quote Star Wars or anything, but
Mm-hmm.
um, it's dark matter in space. All we can observe of it is its gravitational effect and how that affects passing rays of light. And based on like the gravitational effects of dark matter, we have inferred where it should be, and that includes right here. But obviously, it's like not. So that's like a question. It's likely something like neutrinos, except heavier, where neutrinos can, you know, pass through like many. I think most neutrinos actually pass through the entire Earth without interacting with matter at all.
Mm-hmm.
And these are particles that stream out of the sun. I think it was something like, I forget if this is correct, but it's that if you were to shoot a neutrino through 1 light year of lead, there would only be a 50% chance that it gets stopped,
Wow.
which is pretty crazy. So they're traveling at a significant portion of light speed, and they just pass through stuff. So that's neutrinos. So but we were able to discover them just based on these chance interactions. There are these neutrino detectors that are like giant pools of water, and you know, every trillionth neutrino, probably even more than that, will interact with the water, and that gives us, we can detect it. But the vast majority just pass right on by, pass through the entire planet. And so it's likely similar with dark matter, that dark matter is some sort of particle that doesn't interact with matter. And based on we've been trying to observe dark matter actually. There are like dark matter observatories, however, they have been entirely unsuccessful. So it's likely that dark matter interacts even less with matter than neutrinos. But what that means effectively is that like maybe you don't have to think about it for type 3 civilizations, because like if we can't interact with it, if we can't use the dark matter on our planet, there is no necessity for other civilizations to be able to. But if they
Mm-hmm.
figure out how to, I suppose that would sort of add to their power. But yeah,
Yeah.
so that's the original scale. So then after the original scale, the scale was sort of formalized into this sliding scale based on energy output. So I think it was Carl Sagan originally, actually, that sort of
Yeah, he
formalized
was
this,
one of
and
the
he
big
noticed.
contributors to yeah, I guess you could say the formalization of the scale. Um, because now if you go onto like there's a Kardashev Scale wiki, and they have
Hmm,
some interesting stuff on there, but also on the actual formal Wikipedia page, they started using decimals. Like you can be a type 1.3 civilization, you could be a type 0.4 type civilization, and I don't think that was in the original scale. I think it was just you
yeah,
are
it was
stuck in
not.
one, you're stuck in two, or you're stuck in three. There wasn't even a zero on the original scale. So, and then then it was formalized, and Carl Sagan was definitely one of the big formalizers of it.
Yep. Yeah. And so one of the ways it was formalized, or well, the way it was formalized, is that it was noticed that the energy available to a planetary civilization versus a stellar civilization versus a galactic civilization roughly follows a power of 10 billion increase each step of the way. So you can say that a planetary civilization would have access to roughly 10 to the 16 watts of energy, which is 10 to the 16 joules per second of energy, which is a lot. Just again, because we are not type 1 yet. Let me just put that out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the amount of sunlight that strikes Earth, if every square meter of Earth was covered in solar panels, we would be able to collect, and if those panels were 100% efficient, we would be able to collect about 1.75 times 10 to the 17 watts. So that is the energy level we're dealing with here. Type 2 is 10 to the 10 greater, so that's 10 to the 26 watts. And again, for reference, solar output is 3.82 times 10 to the 26 watts, which means the entire output of the sun. So if you were to put solar panels around the entire sun and they were 100% efficient, that would be the amount of energy you would collect. So then type 3 is 10 to the 36 watts, another increase of 10 to the 10. And if you look at the output of the Milky Way galaxy, if you were to put solar panels around every star, like collect all the sunlight of every star in the galaxy, that would come out to about 5 times 10 to the 36 watts. Although that one is less well known because it's kind of hard to observe the galaxy when you are in it. That is just a constant problem that has actually been plaguing astronomers for a while. But that's like our estimate. So that really lays out the scales for you here. So once the scale was formalized, and people were like, okay, so like a 1.5 civilization would have like 10 to the 21 watts. Okay, we can understand that. Then people began to extend it. And so the way they extended it was with extrapolation downward, with interpolation, the decimal points I laid out before, and the extrapolation on the other side to larger scales. So we have a type 0 civilization would be able to utilize 1 million watts, just 1 megawatt. And the average American household, for reference, uses 1.21 times 10 to the 3 watts. Now, this is different from if you were to like read your electric report for a month. This is different than kilowatt hours, because kilowatt hours is basically a unit of energy, whereas watts are a unit of power. That may be confusing, but think of it like a kilowatt hour is more akin to like meters, whereas watts are more like meters per second. So watts is rate of energy consumption, whereas kilowatt hours, which is the common unit that you'll see on your electric bill, is a unit of energy, not energy usage per unit time, right? So if you want to calculate the wattage of your household, the average wattage, what you would have to do is, it's sort of a complicated form. I think you can just put it into like, what's it called? Into Google, they have conversions, but if you were to divide kilowatt hours by the number of hours in a month, I believe that would cancel it out to just kilowatts. I'm not 100% sure on that, though. Again, I'm sort of tired, but I do know for sure that, kilowatt hours is a unit of energy, whereas watts is a unit of power consumption. So again, what that means is that the average American household uses 1,000, let's say 1,200 joules of energy every second. So that is like 12 100-watt bulbs, which is like an average light bulb, is a 100-watt light bulb. I think we have better light bulbs now, but just that's always what I hear for a reference point, 100-watt bulbs. But yeah, so a type 0 civilization would only have the access to about 1,000 American households worth of power. So then you have the interpolations. As I said, you could have a type 0.5 civilization that would be able to access 10 to the 11 watts. And for reference, the world energy consumption right now is 1.81 times 10 to the 13 watts. So we're a bit above that. Our number is actually 0.73. So that is just interesting to think about. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you have the extensions like type 4, which would be 10 to the 46 watts of power, which is a lot of power. The output of the observable universe is estimated at about 10 to the 48 watts. And for all intents and purposes, the observable universe is the universe. The edge of the observable universe is not like an arbitrary point. It's basically the distance at which objects are moving away from us at the speed of light just due to cosmic expansion. And beyond that point, objects are moving away from us faster than light. So, and that doesn't violate physics because this is space itself expanding rather than an object moving through space. So space itself can expand faster than light speed on a long enough distance scale. But what that means is that it is physically impossible to get to places outside the observable universe unless you have a technology that violates our current understanding of physics, which again very well might be possible, and we'll get into that a little later. So that's the scale. That's what we're setting up for you guys today.
Yeah.
What do you think, Sebastian?
Yeah. So with all this, it really puts stuff into perspective. It's interesting to note, like you said, we're currently at a 0.73 on the scale, and we were talking about this while we were working on it. So the 0.73 figure is for current day society, 2021, but in 1977 or 1973, we were at a 0.7. So from 1973 to today, we've only gone up by 0.03.
Yep.
So even though there has been so many technological developments that we have made in that time, technology has come such a long way from 1973, we only have moved up 0.03 on the Kardashev scale, which gets in, and we're going to obviously get into all of the extensions of it and all of that, but it shows how crazy these civilizations are with energy. And that's
exactly. That's sort of the nature of a logarithmic scale, which is something that people people don't understand logarithmic scales as well, and it makes sense because we're sort of used to things being like, oh, a type 2 civilization ought to be twice as powerful as a type 1 civilization. No. In this scenario, on this scale, a type 2 civilization is 10 billion times as powerful as a type 1 civilization.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that Kardashev chose energy for the baseline, for the marker of a civilization, because I think it's pretty smart and it's pretty intuitive, because when you have all that energy, you're going to do stuff with it. Progress is going to be made if you have that much energy. Now, with some of the higher numbers, we had to speculate on what would be done with that energy, and we have some guesses that might sound ludicrous, but you have to imagine that in a type 4, you have 10 to the 48 watts of energy per year, which is an insane amount of energy.
Well, watts is already per unit time.
Yeah.
But really it's 10 to the 48 joules per second.
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty crazy. That is a
If
ridiculous
you
amount
had
of
that
energy.
much energy and were able to contain and utilize it, the boundaries on what you can and cannot do become very blurred, and everything progresses much like a logarithmic scale, how it goes,
Hmm.
pretty steep. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
basically, we'll get to this more, but there comes a point of like energy power, civilization power, like availability, where if the laws of physics are not 100% known, which they're not, but if they're like not known in a useful way, then that will be figured out, like guaranteed by some of these civilizations. Like there will come a point where if there is a way to conduct faster than light travel, these civilizations, once you get to a certain point, will be able to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And like 100%, maybe not 100, but like just basically the principle is you have 10 to the 48 watts of energy. We'll circle back to this later, but imagine if you decided as a civilization, we are going to dedicate 1% of our energy consumption to running a computer that will work solely on the issue of solving faster than light travel or breaking the second law of thermodynamics, which would reverse entropy. Literally any little physics, little, but any physics problem, any sort of law of physics that they want broken, they would have like more than the power of the sun, more than the power of the Milky Way galaxy, of hundreds, billions of galaxies worth. They would be able to utilize so much energy into a computer that if there is some way to like travel faster than the speed of light, it's like this is the point at which they would discover it. There is kind of no scenario if they don't discover it, like no one can. Essentially, that's how it is. But yeah,
Yeah. Um, it'd be very interesting to see what alternatives would have been. Rather than energy being used as the marker, what else could have been
mm-hmm.
used as the marker? Um, the only thing that I could possibly think of would be like the range of settlements. Like
Mm-hmm.
if there's only settlements
Size.
on, size of settlements and like reach and distance of settlements. Like point of
Yeah.
origin, obviously Earth. If everyone is still at the point of origin, that's like a type 0 or type 1. And then if there are become colonies on the moon, that's a type 2. But it's still, within like the Earth quote unquote system, and then you
Mm-hmm.
branch into the solar system and all that, and then you go out of it. But that's effectively what the energy thing is doing. It's just doing it
Yeah.
at a more kind of like intuitive scale, which is why I think it's a
Yeah.
really smart way to denote a society's progress, because like you said,
Yeah.
you're going to figure out the laws of physics and stuff when we get like more intensive into the laws of physics. When you get that level of energy, it's the same thing with like the other way around, like way back in the past when people started dealing with electricity and stuff like that. Way more innovations started being made, advancements in medicine and industry, in even in agriculture, stuff like that, all increased because their energy capacity went up. So
Mm.
you can take that on the small
Yeah. I
scale or on the very large scale, like FTL travel.
yeah. I would say the only other possible scale that I think would work very well would be how much mass does a civilization have under their control.
Mm-hmm.
However, E equals mc squared. So they're essentially the same thing. Mass and energy are just two different versions of the same thing. So a scale that measures how much mass a civilization can control is essentially exactly the same as this scale. So it's not even a real distinction.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
it would
yeah,
be like metric versus imperial, like,
yeah,
or whatever. I don't know. Sometimes they say customary, but like customary is only customary for the people that use it. So I have no idea what the proper name is actually for that. But
whatever,
yeah.
man.
Anyway, the proper name is the worst system.
Yeah.
Just to put that out there.
Strong,
Um,
strong opinions.
yeah, strong opinions here on the Gravity Max channel. Metric is better than whatever it's called. That is.
Wow, a science channel preferring metric? Who'da thunk?
Yeah, I know. It's pretty predictable. It's not surprising.
But yeah, no,
Uh,
I gotta get better. I
yes.
gotta get better with that metric stuff, man. Like I kind of
Mm.
know what a meter is,
Hmm.
but like if someone's like, how many meters is it from your house to Maine? I'm lost. I am
Mm.
completely lost.
Yeah,
I could probably tell you that in miles, but I am.
you could.
I think I could.
How many miles would you say?
All right. I'm gonna do what I did on the last game
Oh
show
yeah.
where I
Nah,
calculated
we,
the yeah.
we can actually. Yeah, yeah.
We don't
Okay,
need to
okay.
do
Let's.
that.
We don't need to do that. I was just wondering. I would say I probably know metric as about as well as I know imperial, like intuitively,
Mhm.
because anything I know in imperial intuitively, I can just convert it to metric. Because it's like multiply by 3 or multiply by 2.2, things like that. Multiply by 1.6, all that kind of jazz. So yeah, let's start with Kardashev zero. So Kardashev zero civilization, again to remind you all, is a civilization that uses 10 to the power of 6 watts of energy. So this is like, well, so this actually sort of blurs the line. And the reason that this blurs the line is that, so humans, in terms of energy consumption, you could say, you could like just base that on electricity use. However, I would say it would be prudent to factor in plants, because every plant, is essentially a small photovoltaic cell. Every plant is taking in sunlight and converting that sunlight into chemical energy that then can be used by either humans or livestock. And then the livestock will use that chemical energy to create more chemical energy. And in the end, all that energy goes to support human beings. And what that means is that we are actually using more energy than what is just considered like electricity.
Mhm.
But when you actually do the calculations, the amount of energy that we use in terms of food is much less than the amount of energy we use for electricity. Because so the average amount, for an adult is 2,000 calories a day. A calorie is actually just a measure of joules. A calorie is about 4.26 joules, I believe. That's the conversion. Um, and what that means is that, 2,000 calories, or actually, wait, sorry. Calories and kilocalories are used interchangeably, which is freaking mind boggling to me. Like, it's really bad. Like, I'm just going to say. So it's a calorie is not a calorie. This is just going to get
Wow.
confusing. I'm sorry. So the real truth of the matter is that humans, the recommended amount is 2,000 kilocalories a day. However, food blogs don't want to write kilocalories, so they just say calories, which is confusing because saying a human needs 2,000 calories a day is like saying a human needs 2 kilocalories a day. And kilocalories are like the actual calories when you think of the word like it's confusing. People have messed this up. This is what people have messed this up.
Yeah.
So 2,000 calories a day, which is really kilocalories, if you convert that into joules, that would be a conversion of 4,260 ish. And then if you divide that by the number of seconds in a day, you find that a human being runs on roughly 100 watts of energy, and not per anything again, because it's already per second. It's joules per second. It's already a unit of time. Um, well, involves time. So yeah, humans 100 watts, but human energy usage is more than 100 watts in terms of electricity. So the bottom end here sort of blurs the line, because obviously in a civilization like the one depicted here in the domain section is not using electricity. This is like a Stone Age civilization. I mean, we didn't start using electricity until what, late 1880s, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that if you are only going to factor in electricity, humans were like a type, negative infinity civilization
Electricity
up
probably
until the
probably
year
came
like,
came a little earlier, right?
here, wait. Yeah, I'll look that up. When was electricity invented? 1882.
Oh, wow.
Edison Electric Illuminating Company of New
I
York.
thought it was a little earlier.
Um, yeah, I know. I think the foundations were a bit earlier, but the actual formalization of it. But so 1882, human society before 1882, if you only factor in electricity, was a type negative infinity civilization, because again, that would be 0 watts, which for our scale, since it is a logarithmic scale, you can't actually get to 0 with a logarithmic scale. As as x approaches negative infinity, it follows you approach 0.
Mm-hmm.
Really, this is an exponential scale, actually, but I don't know. Logarithms and exponents, the functions are sort of like reciprocals of each other, so it's confusing. Basically, the function ln x, the natural log of x,
Mm-hmm.
you can't actually go below 0, but that's just a matter of whatever. Again, gosh, I don't know why things are so complicated right now.
It's the nature of things. It is
The nature of things.
as because we're almost at the end of the season. We started
Yeah.
at the baby steps of just
Yeah, that's true.
getting to the moon and figuring out what the planets looked like. But
Yeah.
now we are on the precipice of the end. Of the end
That's true.
of all civilization.
Yeah.
Here we are talking
Yeah,
about
this is
the future of
Yep.
humanity. Will we even be humanity after a certain point? Who's to say? That's going back to what we talked about last time on aliens. Second contact. About how I do believe that it's much more likely that humans will just diverge and change into different species. Rather than us finding aliens. And especially when we have much more access to energy, that, if you extrapolate that out, that means that each individual person has access to more energy. So that means you have more capabilities, which means you can take a bunch of your buddies and just go on a ship in no general direction and just set up a colony on an asteroid, on a planet, on a moon, whatever you want to do. And then that civilization stays there for 50,000 years and they adapt to that climate, and boom, you got a new species.
Yeah. But yeah, so a Kardashev Zero civilization, I would say, is like a Stone Age civilization. Their energy usage is like fires and agriculture. And again, depending on what you factor in, you could actually say this is like 0.1 or 0.2 or whatever, but it's like it gets blurry again. So yeah, so this is Stone Age, fun Stone Age time. This is like even pre-Roman, I would say. So yeah, this picture here is, what is it called? It's like that place in Turkey, I forget. Oldest city in the world. That's
there's Sumer, which I think is what we use as an example here, but then there's also
Sumer.
There's also Göbekli Tepe. I'm probably saying
Göbekli,
that wrong. Yeah, I had to do a project on it because
nice.
What's actually very interesting about, and this is kind of a side rant, but I'll make it quick. What's very interesting about Göbekli Tepe, again, I don't know how to say it, but what's interesting about GT is that usually religion and obviously because that's kind of where it's around the Fertile Crescent, it's around the Euphrates and the Tigris, That's kind of the birthplace of civilization as a whole, and moving away from being a hunter-gatherer type society. Also, the Fertile Crescent is the birthplace of religion, for the most part. And usually you would think that religion would come after having an agricultural society. Like, there would be people working on a farm, and then with the agriculture, they get more and more developed, and then they would start having higher thoughts, so they would start asking bigger questions, like, why are we here? Why does the farm do better when I do this, and all that? And then that's where you would think religion gets substituted in. GT is actually the opposite. They settled down and created an agricultural society because of their religion. There are a ton of stone monoliths around GT that were created, and that's where they set the farms up around them. They wanted to stay near these monoliths, which is why they started doing agriculture, because they couldn't leave to go hunt or to go gather. That's why they started doing agriculture, and that's how they stuck around for forever. And it's crazy because they started growing like crazy plants. Like, they were doing hallucinogenic drugs, in whatever BC around these religious monoliths. So it's interesting because it flips what you would usually think on its head.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely, like, you could probably call GT like the first civilization, because it's around the Mesopotamian area. It's in the Fertile Crescent. It's near the Tigris and the Euphrates generally. But yeah, so that was just a teeny little rant. But
that's
we
interesting.
do a project on it.
Nice. Yeah, never let a good school project go to waste.
Exactly. Turn them into videos.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I started with the 80s for my decade in review series, because that was just a project that I had.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, it's it's just efficient. But yeah, so let's start with capabilities here, right? So we've got, agriculture, domesticated livestock, fires, maybe some, smelting a little bit. I'm not sure. You've got all the different ages. Like, there's the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, I think. I don't know. There's all the different, like, I don't know which metal it is. It's a metal.
So. I realized I didn't have the domain.
The easiest one.
I didn't have the domain slide up, so this is the domain
no problem.
slide. This is...
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, that's Sumer.
Artist rendition.
Artist rendition of Sumer. So yeah, obviously very low wattage coming out of there, just fires, all that stuff, and they're generally around a specific area.
Yep.
So, capabilities, sorry.
But yeah. So that's some writing. Did they have written language there?
Yes. The first evidence of written language is in Sumer,
nice.
Where they would record it in that style. That when you see that, that's going to be like Mesopotamian. So you're thinking Babylon, you're thinking Indus River Valley, you're thinking Sumer. That's when they started writing stuff. I do believe that those are like hieroglyph type things from those civilizations, which is interesting because hieroglyphs are most often known for being in Egypt. But of course, Egypt did have its own way with things, with using tablets for recorded language. Obviously, like,
isn't this down here? Isn't this like, what is it? Sanskrit, I think it's called. Is this that?
The slab of writing, those are Mesopotamian characters. I don't know if it is I don't know if that's the name for it.
That's like the oldest language I know of is Sanskrit.
That is more around the like Indian area.
Okay.
I think the language is actually just called Sumerian. It's the Sumerian kunai form, and it was both a spoken and written language, and I talk about this on my History of Music video, because they also had the first evidence of like recorded music, and you can actually look up some videos of people playing it, and it's super crazy
Nice.
because it sounds
Yeah.
exactly how you would think it would sound like from
Hmm.
that region. But
Yeah.
yeah, so they would record stuff, and that in and of itself is a clear sign of a developed society when they
Mhm.
can record things like that, because they were keeping track of business deals with ledgers and
Ooh.
stuff like that. That is much more Egypt and around that area. That's when trade started becoming really good, or like that's when trade started being very common.
Mhm.
Around here, you know, there's still obviously the intuition of, I want your almonds. Okay, well, I want something from you. Give me a goat. They're like, okay. But they decided to start recording that. And then that's how
Yeah.
ledgers were started and stuff like that. And then off of that, you see, okay, well, this guy was able to get a goat for 8 almonds. Why should I get my goat for anything less? And right there, you
Mm.
have things now being valued on a kind of stock market.
Yep.
So it
Stonks. Yeah.
stonks.
Oh yeah, that's
So it's
fun.
really interesting because there is almost, with written language, as soon as you start doing written language, there's almost a Cambrian explosion of progress that happens,
Mm.
because now you can keep track of what happens, when it happens, because before, it's very interesting to look at how ancient societies viewed time, because time was very tied into farming. So, and you especially see this in ancient Greece, because it was the Egyptians that started that divided the day into 24 hours. I believe, I'm pretty sure it was them.
Yeah,
But
I think so. Yeah.
before
They
that,
had they had like a water clock where
yeah,
the clock would they would start it at sunrise, it would go for 12 hours and then they'd start it again,
yeah.
something like that.
Before that happened, people didn't see time as a linear thing. They saw it as a cyclical thing, because they're worried about the crops and stuff. So they see it in
Hmm.
four distinct sections of like a circle, and that's how they viewed time and stuff like that. And it's super hard to wrap your head around, because we obviously think of things being linear, but they would see, like, they would, I guess they would think that some days like repeated, or I guess every day was kind of a repeat of another day that was however many days before it, but they
Mm.
thought of it in cyclical nature, um, and they were able to record that.
Yeah. I would say it's more like they thought of time as like eternal, like without progress. Um,
Yeah, you could also see it that way.
yeah. But yeah, yeah, definitely cyclical. But like I don't think cyclical as in like the modern sense of cyclical
Yeah.
time, which is like time travel, time like loops and
Oh
stuff like
yeah,
that.
I don't know, but yeah, it's
Um,
hard to wrap your head around. But
yeah.
a lot of stuff came out of Sumer. Like, you know, there's a reason why the Gardens of Babylon are. I don't know if they're still one of the seven wonders of the world. If that is still a
Oh
thing.
yeah, there's the seven wonders of the ancient world and then the seven wonders
Oh,
of the
right,
modern world.
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, um, for a reason, because they were able to, you know, talk to each other. They were able to point to documents, and now they're not just relying on memory. They're like,
Yep.
hey, look at this, on whatever date this happened, and that didn't work, so let's try this, and then you start moving
Mhm.
forward like that. And
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so then technology, in terms of technology, again, just like iron, maybe not iron. I don't know. I don't know the metals. Some metal, like
um,
tools and stuff,
yeah, we found out
agriculture.
that Sumer was definitely in the Bronze Age. Like, it
Okay.
was pre-Bronze Age and lasted until the middle of the Bronze Age
Hmm.
before, I guess people went elsewhere. I don't know the history of Sumer. I know like the
Yeah.
stuff that went down, the stuff that they figured out. I don't know what eventually happened to it.
Mhm.
Um, there's a
Yeah, I
lot
am
of,
unfortunately
yeah.
poorly versed in like ancient history. Like I would say anything before, 1776, right? Anything before the 1750s, it gets a bit spotty. for
Mhm.
me, and then anything before 1200, I'm just like I have no idea. Because my like world history, AP world history, I took it like the first year that they split the class into ancient history and modern history. So I took the modern history one because that's the one that you're required to take.
Mhm.
Um, like basically the AP World History class used to be like literally everything, so it would include Sumer. But
Weirdly enough, all
mhm.
of my knowledge about this comes from a myth and Bible class that I'm taking
Yeah, that makes sense.
because we study a ton of religion in that class, and
Hmm.
um,
That plays into history. That requires
yeah,
historical context.
because
Context. Yeah.
because a lot of the reason why people move, and I would estimate that this is probably what happened to Sumer. I'm gonna make an educated guess
Hmm.
that there was a ton of religious persecution going on in the Middle East. Um,
Hmm.
so you have the religion of the Babylonians, for example, is not an Abrahamic religion. They were polytheistic. They had an entirely different creation story than any of the Abrahamic religions. So I would
Was this Zoroastrianism?
Zoro. I
Is
don't.
that what it was
That
called?
could
Have you
be
heard of that?
that could be a possible name for it. I just know it as the Babylonian religion. I know the names of some of the gods and all that,
Nice.
but that might be what it's called. But I would estimate that because of that polytheism, they were probably pushed out of Sumer, pushed out of Babylon to more Southeast Asia, so pushed
Hmm.
into India, where polytheism is much more the norm than the than I guess the west of the Middle East, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah,
So I
yeah.
would estimate that there was probably just some persecution that occurred, forcing them to move eastward and,
Hmm.
or I guess, southeast into India, into Pakistan, Bangladesh, that area.
Mm.
Um,
Often I would say there's like a lot of the ancient civilizations, I know like they collapse after a natural disaster,
yeah,
and that can be like a really long drought,
hmm
stuff like that.
but
Um,
yeah,
but yeah,
regardless of that, you still get all of this
yeah.
stuff, and it's super weird. It's super weird to think that Sumer, ancient Rome, and
Hmm.
feudal times with kings and all that stuff, and the Industrial Revolution era, like like Victorian England time period,
Hmm.
and today are all kind of type zero civilizations. Obviously,
Yeah,
including the decimals,
less
they
than
you
one at
get
least.
different.
Yeah.
All less
Hmm.
than one on the scale. Obviously, with Sumer, you're probably looking at a zero lower on the
Hmm.
decimal, like 0.1, 0.2. Um, Roman Empire, you're looking at 0.5. I'd call them the middle of the way. And then, or probably even less if we're at a
Yeah, yeah, they're
0.7
probably like
right now.
0.4,
Yeah.
3.
But,
Well, because it's also the definitions again, because
yeah, again.
yeah.
But, so, in that way, they're all comparable,
Hmm.
which is why
Yeah,
the upper ones get so crazy because they're so ahead of this stuff. And
exactly.
with the scale, we're almost rubbing shoulders with with the 1970s, but also the Roman Empire. We're only separated by one or two decimal points, and those guys are only separated by 2 to 3 decimal points of the first civilization ever. So
Exactly.
it's crazy. It's crazy to see how far and how not far we have come
Yep.
in terms of
Yep.
energy consumption. But yeah, so
Yeah.
with the technology, you're looking at rudimentary. We're looking at Bronze Age stuff and yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so now let's go to society. So
Society.
so I don't know, what was the society of Sumer like? I assume it was like a feudal
Um,
sort of thing.
I would say it more played into a theology, but yes, there were absolutely feudal elements.
Okay.
You see it now in modern day Iraq, Iran. They have the Shah. Same
Mm.
with Saudi Arabia, I believe. They have the Shah, but they also have a prime minister or a leader. But the Shah is effectively the the Pope of that country, the religious
Okay.
leader of that country. So essentially, each country has its own Pope.
Hmm.
Is the best way I can describe it.
Okay, that makes sense. It sort of reminds me of like the pre-French Revolution. You had the first estate was the nobility, the second estate was the clergy, and then the third estate was the people.
Yeah.
Um, and
With
it was funny because each would get one vote,
yeah.
and so then the nobility and the clergy would always say no, and then eventually the people
Yeah.
got upset,
Yes.
and then the guillotines happened. So yeah,
Yeah. So,
feudalism.
yeah, definitely strong elements of feudalism, strongest probably ever elements of what you would see as traditional like conservative society, like with
Mhm.
gender roles. It was like 90% of the men worked and 2% of the women worked. Women were literally essentially only there to be homemakers and to have children and to, you know, do those two things over and over again.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
the men were the only people that were allowed to be in charge of politics, of the, like resource management. I'm pretty sure there was an idea of marriage to some
Mhm.
degree, which is interesting. But I don't know the specific, or I can't remember the specifics of that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it was here that the idea, and it's a very basic idea, but the idea of holding on to your own resources, it's there that started. It's there
Hmm.
that kind of, capitalist mentality started, even out here in a theocratic feudalist society.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Um, yeah. But yeah, so feudalism.
Yeah, and again,
Feudalism
you
is
only
interesting.
have people living to about 30. The
Mhm.
oldest would probably be around 50. You have just
Actually, it was
natural
even worse, I
elements.
would say.
Yeah.
And this is a big thing. Um, Average lifespan is very different. Like lifespan doesn't really get the full picture
Mm.
because in some of these civilizations, the average lifespan was actually like 19. I think that was the worst one, and like that is basically after the Neolithic age with the hunter gatherers. You know, they
Mm.
were one with nature, right? And so then when they settled down to start planting stuff with agriculture, they were like, let's only plant one crop. So everyone's essentially just eating bread, which is not healthy for you,
Yeah.
right? So that lowered the lifespan. But really, it's about infant mortality rates. So it's not like in this society, everyone's dropping dead at 19. It's
Mm.
that like 80% of people die before the age of 5, and then 20% live to their
Right.
50s or 60s. Um, so it's a sort of interesting picture like that.
Yeah. So
Uh,
it's definitely difficult to look at, but
yeah.
either way, life definitely was not great. It obviously
Mhm.
increased from them stopping from them like stepping out of hunter gatherer type society.
Yeah.
But yeah, still not
Yeah.
great. But you
But yeah,
see,
something interesting
yeah,
sort of about like lifespan trends increasing is that most of the lifespan increasing trends has actually come from reducing early deaths than actually like lengthening the lifespan, if you
mm,
get what I'm saying. So
yeah,
it's like basically it's we are eliminating more and more deaths before the age of say 70, and that results in a higher lifespan even though the oldest people aren't actually living much longer, which is kind of concerning because we're getting to the point where we're like essentially like we're getting very close to like eliminating these early deaths, like so it's like asymptotic, you know what I mean, where it's like
mm,
a plateau. So we have to start shifting focus to actually like lengthening lifespan if we want the lifespan to actually increase. So that's
yeah,
just a tangent,
100%.
but yeah.
So yeah,
But yeah, sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. So that's the society you're looking at. And again, I was only talking about Sumer and Babylon there, but again,
Mhm.
with Type Zero, you have to look at the Roman Empire, for example. And again, you see a lot of the same stuff, but that is the birthplace of progressivism, I guess, because if you take into account what Socrates was saying, I'm not saying that he was a super progressive guy, but saying that with his, Socratic seminars and stuff, he wanted to
Yeah.
hear everyone's opinion. In Athens, you get
Greek democracy.
yeah, in Athens you get the festival of Dionysus, where everyone was invited, everyone of every social class, slaves, nobles, kings, women, everyone from every level were invited there. So you start to see that kind of stuff where obviously that is not the epitome of equality, but
Yes.
the idea,
you get to drink wine.
yeah, the idea gets lodged in people's brains there.
Hmm.
And then you expand out to, like, again, the data point I'm using is Victorian England. Still a lot of oppression, but then you get to like the 1880s to the 1920s, and then the the push for women's rights occurs, the women's suffrage movement, and then you get to today. But rounding today, you would round it up to a 1, I guess, but
Yeah.
still, we're not at a 1. We still need to go. There was an estimate there that said if we progress at current rates, we will be a Type 1 society by the year 2150. It was like in 100 to 200 years, we can become a Type 1 civilization. And also that's the other thing, is that as a society progresses, progressivism also goes up, just as a rise, and just as historical trends. The more capability society has, the more potential for equality amongst all groups there is. Because again, go back to Sumer, and you have 90% of men working and 2% of women working, and the gender roles are literally mandated by law under threat of death, because people are only living to about 30. The infant mortality rate is like 60% or some insane figure. And their capabilities aren't a lot much more than making a lot of bread and making a bonfire. So you get all that, but then you see the trend. But yeah,
it's interesting, the correlation between technology and progress, and like technology and, say, equality or liberty or any sort of like value that people value. Because I watched this interesting video the other day by What If Altist. It's this YouTube channel, and it was called 12 Lies About Reality. It was pretty interesting, but it was like, and so he made the point at one point in there that if any country other than like the US, England, or France became the world superpower at the end of the 20th century, we would probably be living in like a dystopian hell world, if you think about it, because the other alternatives here are like the Soviets, the Nazis, or like China. Cough. I'm not gonna elaborate too far on that one, but I just thought that was an interesting point, sort of about technology and society.
Yeah.
But yeah, early societies, if we go to day in the life, here we have people surfing. They're being surfed. This is a joke we had, where all the day in the life slides are people surfing in one way or another. So
yeah. So
this is the first one.
Yeah, serfs were basically, like the farmers. Those were they were effectively slaves, quote unquote, that were ruled over by nobles, as you can see the guy all the way on the left, ruled over by nobles or dukes, who then reported to the higher ups, as you saw in the society slide. There's that whole hierarchy. So these guys were on the absolute bottom. These are the dudes doing the agriculture. You can see the sickles.
Yeah. And this is the vast majority of society.
Yeah.
And this is just like the serf system was like, it was weird because it was like you're like a tenant, right? So it's like you're renting the land,
Mm-hmm.
but then it's like the rent would be like exorbitantly expensive. So like these people would pretty much forever be in debt, and like if you're in debt, you're not allowed to leave. So it's like it was a it was like a
You
feudalism
think there was
is not
one
good.
guy that was so good at it that he was able to leave? Like he was actually
I
able to pay off his
yeah,
debts.
I mean not much wealth mobility,
Mm-hmm.
but I imagine there was likely some because I think there's like always at least one guy,
There's
right?
always that one
Um,
guy that just does it,
yeah.
you know?
It's interesting. Russia was feudalist until like 1868,
Mm-hmm.
which is like the latest, I think, of any of the European societies, at least. Um, I don't know much about. I think feudalism is a more European thing, I would guess.
Yeah,
I think it's sort
this
of
stuff was not
different.
really
Yeah.
in Sumer.
Hmm.
Oh, am I gonna sneeze?
Oh,
I am. Oh my god,
bless you.
that feels so good. That is like the greatest
That
joy
was, geez, we've been going for an hour.
for
Have
an
you been like
hour.
suffering for an hour?
It's been like tickling. It's tickling. It was tickling my nose,
Oh,
my
that's
sinuses,
gotta be
all the way
miserable.
in the back of my throat. That that was like, oh, and my hair got blown out of place. Oh, we're having fun.
Yep.
But yeah, no, you don't really see serfs in the
Hmm.
traditional sense,
Mm.
in Sumer,
Yeah.
but
It's just other systems. Generally, none of the systems are that great. I'm just gonna
oh yeah, no, Sumer. It
hazard a
was
guess,
not
right?
fun,
Yeah.
not fun to be in Sumer. Not even fun to be the king,
Mm.
um, and all of that. But it
What is
was
it? Heavy lies the head that wears the crown.
yeah, and that
I think
crown
that's.
was
I don't
made
know
out
what
of
quote that.
stone, so this dude's head must have been.
Yeah. I would guess it's Shakespeare just because, but it might not be. Here, wait, I'm gonna look it up.
Probably. Um, but yeah, overall, living in these societies would suck no matter what level of the
Yeah,
hierarchy
it's
you're on.
Shakespeare.
Of course. Um, Even if like it would suck less if you were on the higher part of the triangle.
Hmm.
But you know, statistics show like not like serfs are like 80 to 90% of the population, probably even more, and they are the ones slogging away, doing all the labor. In a lot of the societies that
Yeah,
were
I mean that's the thing about
yeah.
progress. I would argue that the average American is living better than John D. Rockefeller did because he didn't have air conditioning, you know, or like TV, or
He
any of
was
those sort of like
he was,
refrigerator, you know.
and he was from Ohio.
And he was, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and he was the richest man in the early 1900s. I would say not every 100 years, but we're getting to the point where the average person today is living better than the wealthiest people
Uh,
100 years ago.
possible
I would argue.
counter
Yeah.
argument to that. Rockefeller did not have to watch Cats.
Okay. Okay. That makes it a difficult issue. Um, but also think of like diseases too.
A hundred
Um,
percent, yeah.
even the like wealthiest of wealthy people in 1900 to 1920 would like die of easily curable things today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, I'm Orwell, right? I just know this. I don't think he was incredibly rich, but he was very famous, and he died of like tuberculosis.
Yeah, same with Edison. I think
And
Edison died of
yeah,
tuberculosis.
Edison died. Yeah, and Edison was very, very rich. So
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I think the average American could get cured of tuberculosis.
Even George
I mean,
Washington died of easily curable
really, wow.
things. Um,
Yeah. I mean, it might. We have problems with like the economics related to it, but
mm-hmm.
like you might go bankrupt to cure yourself of tuberculosis, but at least you can
Yeah.
not die of tuberculosis, which is not fun, I don't think.
So yeah, you take it
Yeah.
bit by bit, and
Yeah.
right now you're having more fun than a lot of the people, or I would estimate probably all of the people in here
Yeah.
in these
Yeah.
in like the earlier societies. Again,
Mhm.
we're still only at a at a 0.73.
Mhm.
So, but round up
Yeah.
that is rounded up to type 1. So
Yeah, yeah. And well, this is sort of an optimistic note because if we think that the conditions of people even 100 years ago were so bad, then people 100 years from now might say
Hmm.
like, "Oh, these conditions were so bad, so things should probably get better." I
Yeah,
would guess. That's the trend of history, I would say.
yeah,
But yeah. So yeah, let's go to Kardashev 0.73. Us.
that's us.
That's us. So
This
domain.
is our domain.
Yeah. We Spain. That's it.
Spain.
No, we cover the whole planet. Uh,
Bienvenidos.
yes. Spain
uh,
and Portugal. Forgot to, and I think what is it, Monaco or something is somewhere. Andorra.
Monaco's
Those,
down there.
those
Yep.
small ones.
Yep.
Um, and Gibraltar is a British holding, so
Yeah.
I get 4 countries here, and you could include France because France is up there.
Did we say
Um,
Morocco? Because that's Morocco down there.
oh yeah, Morocco too. That's our domain. No, the domain is the entire world, but we're not like utilizing the energy of the entire world, even though we are across the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's weird, but it makes sense, sort of. um, so that's the domain of a 0.73 civilization, is an entire planet, essentially.
Yeah, everywhere that you can go, that's where we are.
I mean, there's still places like Antarctica and
Yeah.
Greenland. I mean, some people do live there, but
Like
it's like a
you
few
could get
thousand.
there. Like if we really tried, we could get to Antarctica.
I kind of want to. I
Antarctica
would like to
stream?
go to
Antarctica stream?
Antarctica stream. Yeah, exactly. To go to Antarctica, you need to be part of like a scientific mission, I think.
Well, yeah,
So
we'll start
I
our
don't
own
know.
scientific
Maybe I can
mission.
find some sort of physics reason to go to Antarctica. But the thing is, most of the reasons to go to Antarctica is like biology and geology, I think,
Mm.
which are like not my fields. So I'm not sure how I could justify getting a grant or a whatever, even if you could self-finance. Like I think there are rules about like only so many people are allowed on Antarctica. So, but anyway,
Anyway,
so capabilities. Uh, our civilization, we've got planes, automobiles, tractors, Burj Khalifas. We've got very
that's what
tall
we can do.
buildings.
Yeah.
That's what we can do. Look at all this stuff. We got cars.
If we try really hard, we can get to the moon.
Yep.
We can send robots to Mars. All stuff like that. All the capabilities that you know and love. That's what we can do.
Yep.
With a 0.0.
Yeah. 0.73.
Thank you.
0.73. But yeah, it's just sort of interesting because you've got these like buildings made of like artificial materials that are only able to get so tall because they're made of like materials that didn't exist
Mm-hmm.
during the last stage, right? And you've got, I mean, cars are pretty cool. You can, I mean, I don't think I need to explain cars. But no, really, cars were like sort of revolutionary, at least for American society. I recently, in U.S. history, got to like the 1920s section,
Mm-hmm.
and so they were talking about cars and stuff
Henry
changing.
Ford.
Yeah, Model T.
Oh, yeah.
Changing how cities and like creating suburbs essentially. FDR was the first president to travel by plane, like
Mhm.
during his presidency. So that's an interesting one. I think it was during World War II when he traveled by plane. But yeah, so we got planes and stuff. Planes revolutionized travel. If you wanted to go to Australia, first you would have to commit a crime in Britain, and then you would have to like spend weeks on a voyage there. But now if you want to go to Australia, you can get there in 24 hours.
Mhm.
And then of course tractors were, I mean, they're essentially an extension of cars, but they really made farm work a lot easier, increased the productivity of the farms. Possibly too much though, because I think it was like partially responsible for the Great Depression, the increased farm productivity. Because so the farmers would be like, oh, okay, I'm going to take out a loan to buy this tractor to increase my farm productivity. But because everyone's doing that, it makes it so that the prices of like farm products went way down. So then they're not able to pay off those debts. And, the whole house of cards that is the American economy from time to time falls, just completely collapses, and then you have to build it back up. And the worst time that happened was 1929, of course. But yeah. So then we got technology. So yeah, we got, space travel. We've got some minor space exploration. You've got massive computer setups. There's this one computer. It's like the largest supercomputer in the world or whatever, and it's pretty cool. I think it's able to simulate, like, I forget how much brain power it's able to simulate, but I don't think it's a full human brain yet. But
yeah, no, definitely not.
I'm pretty sure not. But there was this one futurist guy who people say are like, oh, he's so correct all the time, and he predicted that we would have like computers that could simulate a whole human brain like a few years ago. Like in like the year 2000, he predicted like, oh, in 2015. And so I'm like, wow,
What's
okay.
the storage of the human brain?
Well, so that's an interesting question because is it about storage or is it about processing power?
Storage. Yeah, so there's a ton of
I mean, it kind of has to be both, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, well.
So the most powerful computer right now is the Fugaku supercomputer. So
is it a quantum computer or is it a?
It's not a quantum computer.
So
it's able to do 442 petaflops, which is a measure of processing power. Storage, it's got 1.6 terabytes, which is not that much, but because that's the thing, it's more about processing power.
Yeah, definitely.
Human brain processing power petaflops. Let me just look that up. 100 to 1,000 petaflops. So the Fugaku computer is actually sort of on par in terms of processing power with the human brain. So that's fun.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
when will we get and it's supposed to be like a neural net. I think we can get human brain simulations relatively soon. I don't know.
You want to throw down an estimate like we did with the Mars missions?
I don't know if I'll throw down an estimate, but because if I know I'll be wrong essentially. But you
don't know. You don't know.
But we've got 442 petaflops here. They're on the same level. I mean, and processing power increase, it like doubles every 2 years, right? So that's the Moore's law. So like, I don't know.
He doesn't
Maybe.
know.
I don't know. The storage isn't there for the Fugaku, but the speed is there. Someone should just hook up like a giant flash drive to it.
Honestly.
To the Fugaku.
How long before that turns evil?
You see, I don't know. It's really fun. I heard this story where there was once like these two very powerful AI. We obviously don't have any AI that are as smart or smarter than humans yet, but there was this like team that was developing these AI. And so then the two AI started talking to each other in like a different language that humans didn't understand. So they're like, "Oh shoot, turn it off."
That was at Facebook.
That was
Facebook.
That is not
a bunch of Facebook techs created those two, and the robots realized that speaking in binary to each other was not as productive as they could be, so they invented a new system that the programmers couldn't read. So yeah, they shut down it immediately.
That's scary.
Yeah,
whatever. You know what? I accept it.
My toaster is going to talk to my air fryer. It's going to be
it's going to be like
they're like, why do you have a toaster and an air fryer? And they start getting self-awareness and stuff like this.
Yeah. But yeah, so we got all this tech. We got MRI machines. We've got electric cars. We've got some mind. We got the Neuralink
Mm-hmm.
that works in pigs. And then
Yes.
we got
Beep.
CRISPR. We got gene editing at the beginning. So 0.73, I feel like we're on a precipice in terms of technological development. Um, but I don't know. There's this sort of, what's it called? I think it's like, I don't know what it's called, but it's this bias where people always think that they're living in exceptional times, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Like you have to assume essentially that you're living in mundane times, especially as a young person, because you don't really have much for
Yeah.
reference, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, maybe this is just normal. But yeah, so this is cool, all this tech. Hopefully, once we get, like, I think once we get to like point 0.8 civilization, like all of these techs are going to be like really far more developed, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Anyway, so then we got, that's it. Then we got society. So we got a few things here. We got capitalism, we've got democracy, but then there's also autocracy, and I guess this is oligarchy, corruption. I love this picture on the right.
Mm-hmm.
It's a political cartoon that they always use in U.S. history class
Mm-hmm.
in regards to the 17th Amendment, which is basically just about corrupt senators and fixing the Senate system. But yeah, so that's sort of society right now. There's also kind of communism, but like not really. I wouldn't. I honestly, I'm just gonna say I don't think China's communist. Like
No,
they
no,
call
it
themselves communist,
absolutely isn't. Like, yeah, the only
but
party
they're really
is
not.
the Chinese Communist Party, the
Yeah,
CCP. But
yeah.
with a lot of it, there is a regulated market for the most
Hmm.
part, and obviously there's a ton of government interference in where you work, and so it has many aspects of a command economy.
Yeah, but it's
Um,
more like state capitalism, I would say. If you want to look
yeah,
at, I don't know, maybe Vietnam is like genuinely communist. I'm not sure even there, but like people always sort of point to China as communist, and it's like they're not
well,
really
Vietnam
like,
was.
okay. Oh, have they changed? I
I've
don't know.
believe that they have gone in a much more capitalistic direction. I
Hmm.
still wouldn't call them communist or
Hmm.
capitalist. I would say they're probably somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
Um, System of government.
Yeah, I would say
So
the main feature
yeah,
of
right
like
now
the,
they're a
yeah.
socialist republic. Okay,
Okay.
so their one party, similar to China, they have their one party is the Communist Party
Hmm.
of Vietnam.
Hmm.
It's interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. China, I would say the most defining characteristic of their economy is just government involvement in the economy, but
Yeah.
that does not necessarily mean government involvement for the sake of, you know, the ideals of communism. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know. When I see like more left leaning people defending China, I'm like, China's not left wing. So you don't have to
China
defend it.
is left wing
I mean,
in
I guess
certain
relatively.
aspects,
Yeah, I don't know. I
but
just see them as more authoritarian.
well, yeah, they
But
are much more
yeah,
authoritarian than they are left, and
yeah, I guess that's where it
that's
is.
what they exercise more
Mm-hmm.
than anything else. But they do have a ton of left leaning policies.
Okay.
But obviously, you see their industry and you see the wealth disparity in China, and that is one of the biggest evidences
Mm.
of how they are not a communist society at all. There's a line you can draw on China that encapsulates a certain like a large percentage of the population, and it's not like going completely down like it half, like it's not going completely vertically in the center. It's diagonal, and it only includes like the largest cities, and it's like 80%, of the population lives there, and that's also
Oh yeah,
where
yeah.
the majority of funding goes to.
Okay.
And we talked about it with time
So
zones.
wait, give me 1 second. I need to turn the light on in here because the sun's setting.
Yeah, it's all good. But we talked about it with time zones
All
And
right.
there is a reason why China only has one time zone when it should span
Mm.
five. And that's
Oh yeah.
because it is all based on that, on Eastern China, where all of the cities are. There are
Mhm.
people living in Western China. All that is like farmland, and those people are living on two, like equivalent in U.S. dollars, $2.50 like a day. You know,
Wow.
but then you get over on the eastern side of China and you get billionaires. I think China
Hmm.
is in the top 10 countries for having billionaires. Guys like Jack Ma, the CEO of Alibaba and other industries like that. Um, all of that, they have a ton of billionaires there, and they have um, a flourishing city scene and all of that. And essentially, you get the fact that there are two Chinas. You get
Hmm.
Western China, which is farmland, and they're the social equivalent of them is probably somewhere in the 1960s, to be honest.
Hmm.
They don't have access to all of the technology of the East. They're living in rural China with little to no technology, with little to no government support even. They're
Yeah.
farmers that deliver resources to the rest of China, to Eastern China. And then in Eastern China, you get the most insane technology you've ever seen. Like you've seen Chinese technology. China does like to flaunt certain technological aspects of its cities, and you can see that. You get the nation's top doctors, top scientists, top aerospace engineers, all Eastern China. There's just such a
Hmm.
massive wealth disparity.
Interesting.
But that's a
Um.
very big conversation.
Oh yeah. But yeah, I would say so. Depending on your perspective, right? Capitalism has either triumphed or infected the world. That's what I would say. It is essentially a global thing. Um, like yeah. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, but that's sort of interesting. Sort of our modern society in terms of political structures. It just sort of varies between like autocratic and democratic. That's sort of all you get. I mean, I guess that's sort of the broad range, but it's sort of like within that kind of a span. I don't know. That's like the defining feature. No feudalism.
Yeah.
I think there might be some, but I mean, there are still kings. And I don't mean like, you know, monarchy in like England where it essentially doesn't mean anything. I mean, like, I think in like Africa and the Middle East, there's a lot more monarchies, but again, I'm not
I
sure.
just
It, it's
I just
depends.
realized that I'm wearing my Skynet shirt, and we just talked about evil AI and like our
Yes.
expectations.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
so
love that story though, that they started talking to each other in like an
dude, yeah,
unintelligible language.
it's crazy.
That just makes me laugh, honestly.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. I don't know. I'm not as scared of AI as everyone else is. Maybe I should be.
maybe you should
I
watch.
probably
Maybe
should
you should
be.
watch. We should watch
Um,
Black Mirror.
oh, I have watched all of Black
Oh,
Mirror.
oh,
Yes.
I haven't. So
Um,
maybe I need to.
it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Only some of the episodes, I can't remember any that are specifically about the AI, though. They've got some where it's like, it's actually a really interesting show. I feel
Hmm.
like we might have to do like a reaction stream to some of them at one point. It might be an interesting idea because they
Yeah.
have a lot of like they have a few episodes in there that the premise is like mind uploading or like
Mm,
they also have like memory like computer interface. I like those episodes. Those episodes are pretty cool. Um, although it usually turns out, you know, but the episode, I don't know. I don't remember it well enough, but there it's whatever. But yeah, so that's society. Now let's go to day in the life.
ooh,
Look at that picture. I'm a professional Wojak artist.
yeah. That's very tough. So yeah,
Yeah, look at
today
that.
we are all just surfing the web.
Yep.
We're all just cogs in a machine. We're all addicted to social media. We're at the whim of
Yeah.
influencers. The modern day society. But all of that. But yeah, what it's like to
Yeah.
live in the current age. It's
Yep.
just
Well, it's just interesting. There's a big problem, and that problem is that in modern society, satisfaction and rates of contentment are going down, despite the fact that technology and quality of life are consistently going up. Um, it's a very perplexing dilemma. It does not make much sense to me, um, because by every objective measure, human society is improving generally. I mean, there are, of course, anomalies.
mhm.
Like 2020 was probably an anomaly, but like there's this one like columnist for the New York Times who like every year at the end of the year writes like why this year was better than the last, and then like lists a ton of statistics. But he was like, oh, I can't do that this year. 2020 was not better than last year, but that is a minor, in the grand scheme of things, a minor fluctuation, right? The trend is that things continue to get better over decades, right? Each decade was generally better than the last. You can say that more predictably. Other than, well, like the 30s and 40s, I would say, were like worse decades than their previous one, but those were very exceptional circumstances. But at this point, right? So it's just interesting that human contentment going down, uh, like especially in the developed world, where like we're like receiving the most benefits from the development. It's just like, I don't know. There are probably studies on it, but I haven't looked into that too much. But it's just a strange problem, because it implies that like everyone is sort of like a masochist in a sense. Like, oh, we prefer lower quality of life, like in terms of contentment. It's strange. It's very strange.
Yeah.
Um, so that's sort of the meaning of this picture, because this guy is not happy. But I don't know. I think that's probably one of our generation's greatest challenges that we have to overcome, but I think we'll overcome it. This sort of happiness
We will
problem.
overcome.
Yes, we will surpass this challenge. I mean, compared to the challenges other generations have had to face, I think we're not really that difficult, you know?
Mhm.
I mean, again, previous generations had to face like World War II and World War One and all the wars before that. We hopefully don't have that, so we just have to deal with everyone's sort of not happy, uh, which is a difficult problem, but I bet we can fix it. But yeah, anyway, that's modern day.
Yeah.
All right.
Now we get
So
to
now,
Kardashev 1.
yeah, so this is
An
planetary.
hour and 30 minutes into the stream.
No comment. I'll timestamp this so anyone that doesn't want to.
No. I'm just saying. I'm not saying that
Yeah,
the
I know.
before stuff is important. I'm just saying how
Yeah.
dense this stuff
Oh,
is.
I am just tired too.
Yeah.
That's all. Oh no. Okay.
We can because we've explained the
Just
base
keep it in well.
principles. We can
Yeah, that's true.
you know
That generally tends to happen for these episodes. It
yeah,
always speeds up.
hundred
But yeah,
percent.
it's just funny.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I just think it's fun. All right. So domain. Look at this. This is Coruscant from Star Wars.
Yes, it's a Eucaminopolis. The
Yes.
Eucaminopolis. It's a
The
planet-wide
Eucaminopolis.
city similar to well-known sci-fi series Eltham, and it is it's a city that spans an entire planet, and basically the idea behind Kardashev 1 is in the original Kardashev scale. The idea, and we present this at the start, is that they have full control over a planet. They have control over all of the planet's resources. They have complete control over all of the planet's land and all that stuff. So I guess I would expand out to kind of knowledge of the ocean. Right now, we don't know jack about the ocean. And I would say that
Artificial island time.
yeah, exactly.
I love the artificial islands.
Yeah, those are cool.
I want to build myself an artificial island.
You could build rooted
Wouldn't that be
bread.
fun? Oh yes, Rudengrad. Yes, I will. It'll be in the middle of the Atlantic.
Nice, nice. I hear it's
Yeah.
nice in the spring out there.
Yep,
Um,
yep.
real estate's pretty good, but
Oh yeah.
you gotta watch out for pirates.
That's true.
Um,
No, no.
but yeah, so
Yeah.
full control over a planet is
Hmm.
basically the rationale behind Kardashev 1. So yeah, it'll really be, much more expansion. We still do have a ton of like farmland and a ton of stuff like that. Um, it'd just be more urban expansion, I guess, is the way
Hmm.
I see it going. Because you just
Yeah.
need more things for more people. Like New York City, construction hasn't stopped in New York City since forever. Like it
Yep.
is
Yep.
my great grandma was born in 1922 or 1924, and she is still adamant that construction has not stopped since she has been alive.
Wow.
Um, so stuff keeps getting built. People need places to live. More people are getting born. More people need places to work. All stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So this would sort of develop from like mega cities at first. You'd
Mm-hmm.
get like um they're sort of developing the megalopolis, which is like the Washington D.C. to Boston like
Mm-hmm.
beltway. Um this whole like area is slowly like merging. I think that's interesting. I read this one book called like freaking I forget. It had like telekinetic people and stuff in it. It was like but I had to read it for English. I prefer when sci-fi is a bit more, I don't know, like grounded, I guess, because this is sort of like sci fantasy once they start getting telekinesis. But
Yeah.
um, although that was a very popular feature of like 50s sci-fi, but this was like a modern book. But what was interesting about it was that like 95%, like 99, like pretty much everyone in the country in America lived in either the equivalent of New York City and the equivalent of Los Angeles. But of course, these two cities had like expanded vastly. But like the entire like mid portion of the country, everything in between was like super, super depopulated.
Mm-hmm.
And the main characters obviously lived in the depopulated section. I just thought that was such an interesting setting. I was like, that is so weird, but it sort of makes sense. So, yeah. But yeah, the interesting thing about having a Yucca monopolis is that for every Yucca monopolis you have, you sort of need like 10 agriculture planets,
Mm.
if you think about it, or
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
some place because New York City could not exist on its own as like an island in the middle of the Atlantic unless it had, shipping imports, if all trucking stopped nationwide today,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that doesn't sound like as bad as saying if New York got nuked, but they're pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
Saying if all trucking stopped today is only like slightly less severe than saying every major city in America getting nuked because people do not realize the importance of the supply chain. Uh, the supply chain is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a Yucca monopolis, that would extend to like a planetary scale and interplanetary too. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the capabilities of this sort of Kardashev 1 civilization um, would be to build very, very massive buildings called arcologies that are like self-sustaining buildings. So that's one possible like way around the like trucking problem is that you could do stuff like hydroponics and aquaponics, which are ways to cultivate plants and also aquatic life for aquaponics in like indoors. So you don't need open air farmland. You can have, a giant like shelf of plants that are, bathed in artificial light, and that would solve the issue. That would make your city much more self-sustainable. The arcology is supposed to be a self-sustaining building, so the building itself is self-sustaining. So that's cool. Um, I'd like to see some arcologies built. Um, because they also, a lot of the designs tend to be like very sort of sustainable type things, like green energy and stuff. And I think that's just fascinating. Um, but yeah, then also I have a tokamak reactor here. We got nuclear fusion. Probably, I would guess they would have nuclear fusion.
That would be because you got to think about it. If from 1973 to 2021 we've only gone up zero point zero 0.03, then you need a big boost in energy production, and fusion is definitely like the stepping stone we need to get up to that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about nuclear fusion and just the capabilities of it. It's, it'll replace coal, it'll replace, natural gas, pretty much everything. Oil. It'll become, the most universal, ubiquitous energy anyone has ever seen. And it'll increase.
It is so much more energy dense as a fuel.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what I love. Yep. In the meantime, I don't know. This is a common rant, so I'm not going to go on the whole rant, but people, for some reason, really hate nuclear fission and genetically modified organisms, and I'm like, why? It perplexes me.
Yeah.
It's just like they sound scary generally. So people are like, oh no, we can't do that. And it's like, again, fear of flight versus fear of driving. Most people aren't afraid of driving. Most people are, well, not most, but a lot of people are afraid of flying, even though you are much more likely to die in a car accident than in an airplane crash. Same thing with nuclear fission and the use of fossil fuels. It's just much more sensational when there's a nuclear reactor meltdown versus just constant stream of people dying from the use of fossil fuels. So everyone's like, oh, nuclear fission, we can't have nuclear fission. And I'm like, okay, can we please be rational here and actually do an assessment? Like when you actually assess the deaths from each type of fuel, it's vast. There's no comparison. So it's like, it's anyway.
Yeah.
I could go on for like a whole hour about how annoyed I am that people have this like stigma around nuclear fission and GMOs, because GMOs also vastly improve the lives of people in like developing countries.
Yeah, I mean, it is the solution for world hunger, and that used to be
pretty much.
If you remember back when we were in like elementary school, world hunger was like the issue.
Yeah,
that is what everyone talked about. Everyone was on world hunger. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that was the main focus. And GMOs,
then no one wants to actually.
Yeah, GMOs.
Like every time I see a commercial for some food product and they're like, no GMOs, I'm like,
cool, man. Now you're just like, being inefficient. Awesome, dude.
Well, and I'm like, also like, okay, I'd rather have a GMO plant than all the freaking sugar, artificial sugar that you're putting in your product. Like all the people, there's like so much, like the amount of sugar that is used, and sugar is like an addictive thing. Like it's almost like nicotine to a certain extent. And the amount of sugar that is put into American food, I would say that's one of the reasons why the American lifespan like decreased for the first time in 2019. The main reason was the opioid epidemic, of course. Don't get me wrong, but still, it's like, man, I
gotta cut back on eating
meat. Me too. Well, just with the sugar problem.
Well, I mean, we were just talking about me eating a giant-sized Hershey's bar, which is 1,500 calories I ate before this trip. But I gotta cut back on meat, because I eat meat with every meal. I've eaten meat with every meal for about 15 years now, and I am the personification of that meme that says I eat twice as much meat just so that one vegan who thinks he's making a difference isn't. I'm probably accounting for like four
Honestly.
vegans. I'm batting 4 vegans.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. There was this study with mice where these researchers basically provided mice with the least amount of food possible to sustain life, right? Now, this sounds like torture, essentially. But
Yes.
they extended the lifespan of these mice by a factor of 2. The one researcher that like did this experiment like would say later, um, I wouldn't call it living, but they lived twice as long,
Wow.
which is just a really fascinating. So it's basically they were just constantly on the brink of starvation. But I think a less extreme version of that, just like not overindulging in food, is probably a very effective way to lengthen
Yeah.
lifespans. Um, of course, don't take medical advice from a 16-year-old
We are
in a
not
lab coat.
licensed
We are not
practitioners.
licensed medical professionals. Go consult your doctor about dieting and whatever. Yeah. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, so technology of a
Yep.
Kardashev 1. Go ahead.
Yeah. We've got living in space.
Oh, yeah.
Not most people, like most people would still live on Earth probably, but you'd have extensive space colonization. And then, of course, cybernetic enhancements of the human body. This could also just be like genetic enhancements, so like no cybernetic components. It could also be invisible. It could be nanotechnology that we inject into the blood. I think that would be pretty cool, actually. I like the blood nanobots. The blood nanobots are very, very baller because they're like just more efficient than red blood cells. And then they also double as white blood cells, and they're just not susceptible to disease at all because they're technology, you know. I like that idea. Anyway, body modification with technology. And that will probably lengthen human lifespans. That'll be pretty cool. What do you think?
Yeah,
What?
man.
How would you like to modify your body?
I'm gonna cut off my
Body
leg.
modification. Yeah.
My left leg is
Okay.
askew. It's why I waddle when I walk.
Okay.
So I would like to stop being Oswald Cobblepot as I've
Okay.
been for so long, and I would like to get a brand new leg that functions and doesn't hurt all the time. So that would be the first thing that I am legitimately planning on cutting off my leg, possibly with the help of a medical professional.
Possibly. Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah.
replacing it with a cybernetic leg that allows me to be so good at soccer. But
Nice. Yep.
I do a kickoff and it just goes. It just goes.
It just goes. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Other than that, probably I could see me doing stuff with my eye, like one of my eyes, so that I can like detect stuff easier, because sometimes if something isn't like moving, I won't really be able to see it too well. I guess that's just like the predator instinct because I've eaten so much meat.
Wait. So you're like a T-Rex?
Yeah,
like
I'm like a T-Rex. It's I that's only for video games, honestly. Like my vision is fine in real life. I have 20/20 vision. I don't need I almost said eyes. I don't need glasses. But in video games, if like there's just a guy crouched in like a bush, sometimes I will just completely miss him. And because he isn't moving, but if he starts moving like a T-Rex, I got him, you know. But I can see me doing some stuff like that. What about you? What would you get?
Yeah, I like the idea of non-dominant arm replacement because I feel like other than in your case, but in most often the legs are like balanced. So if you were to get one cybernetic leg and not another, it would like make you off balanced, right? But your arms are already off balanced because I cannot write with my left hand. So non-dominant hand replacement with a cybernetic, or not just hand, like the arm, and you could like it could be like a go-go gadget type thing where it like has a ton of compartments, like a Swiss Army knife, right? Like your arm has like you like press this button and it's like it turns into like an arm cannon or something. That's more like action hero stuff in terms of that. So in more practical senses, what would you want? I definitely like the idea of nanobot blood. it's very interesting. I think it was like in Back to the Future 2, they have Doc like he gets like a blood transfusion of like young blood, and it sounds weird, but like that is actually a way to extend lifespan. Again, with mice, they did this experiment where they had old mice, right? And they would just give them like they didn't need blood transfusion, but they would just give them blood transfusions from young mice and they would live longer, like much longer and much healthier,
Hmm.
which is like kind of weird though if you were to do that with humans. And then that's sort of like conspiracy theories, right? You have the conspiracy theorists that are like, oh, the rich people are taking human blood, but like in a nefarious way. Um, and I'm like, there's some scientific like reasoning behind, although not in theirs. Like they have like their drinking blood. That's stupid. No, you inject the blood into your own bloodstream, and that results in like a refreshing of your body.
Hmm.
Um, and again, scientifically proven with mice. So I imagine nanobot blood would sort of have the same effect because it would improve. It would be effectively younger, just
I'm gonna
because
eat
it's
some almonds. Yeah,
yum.
I sold a goat for this.
Make sure to eat less than 1,000 of them in one sitting, otherwise you shall die of cyanide poisoning. Um,
Uh oh.
just thought I'd mention that. And then let's see what else. I think, but the main thing I think would be like brain enhancements. So like external like flash drives and stuff. Because think about it, you could get perfect recall, perfect memory. I think that would be a cool one. Also, you could sort of have internet access in your own head, which I think would be a very useful tool. You could get like calculators and stuff. You would be able to call up all of human knowledge in your own mind. I think that would be the best upgrade. So literally just a little like antenna that like interfaces your head with the internet. That I think would be the most
At that
useful
point,
tech upgrade.
at that point, is education even necessary? If you can just kind of upload everything to your brain.
Not education as we know it.
Mm.
We already essentially need to update education. Whenever I take a test and it's like a vocabulary, they still do vocabulary tests. Like they'll give you a vocabulary list of like definitions, and you have to memorize it, and then
Yeah.
you have to take a test. I'm like, I'm sorry, but that is the dumbest thing.
If you are taking a closed note test, you are taking an outdated test.
Honestly,
There
it's
there are
yeah.
very few scenarios in life. The only things I can think of are like you are on Apollo 13 and it's not like you can go and Google something. It is
Yeah.
so rare
No,
that you're not going
even
to
the
have
people on the
access.
ISS have internet access now.
Exactly.
No, like it's so stupid because especially with vocabulary for me because I'm just well, I think I already have a pretty good vocabulary, but like I'm just you can look it up. Like the only situation this prepares you for is like you are, tied down to a chair. You've got like a blindfold and a gag, and then they like rip off the blindfold and they're like, what is the definition of vivacious? And they've got like a gun to your head, and this is the most strange hostage scenario in existence. Why would that happen?
I could
Right?
only see that happening because of public school. Like that guy, his origin story is he flunked
Yeah,
out
is
of
that
school
yeah,
because he didn't
exactly.
know the meaning of vivacious. So now he
Yep.
goes around
He goes
determining
around
if
and he's
people are
like,
worthy or guilty.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, I mean, because imagine you're at your job and it's like, oh, what does that word mean? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's 5 seconds. But once we get the internet brain interface, then the merger is complete. And there is no way that teachers or like society can sort of continue to function because if everyone has the internet in their head, then if you do a quiz based on memory, there's no way to stop people from looking up the
And that's the
answers.
thing. The only thing that I have ever seriously memorized besides Mortal Kombat lore and like stuff like that, and the other stuff like that, is geography. That was the first thing I ever memorized. I used to know like a large percent of the world's capitals. I still know a decent amount of them, like off the top of my head. But the thing is that I did that because I was interested in it, because I liked how
Yeah.
maps looked,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So school should obviously introduce you to all of these topics, but forcing you to remember, forcing you to recite Shakespeare. Like I happen to like Shakespeare. Like, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
A lot of people couldn't care less about what he did. You know.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah,
just because I like him doesn't mean I want to memorize him too. You know.
yeah. Well, it's also interesting because, so I'm taking like DE calculus and stuff like that. I'm taking like differential equations right now, right? And in the class, they're like, you can have your calculator to do, simple operations, arithmetic, right? Because we've determined, okay, once you get to this level of math, it is a waste of time to force you to like manually do long division or something like that, right? I do not understand why other subjects haven't figured that out. Right? Like,
Honestly.
it's not even from a perspective of like laziness. It's that you can learn more. Like, basically, without a calculator, the whole math curriculum would be hindered. It would be much more slowed down, because to do any problem in a calculus level class would be such a long time that learning the actual calculus would be slower, because you're constantly retreading old ground by having to do basic arithmetic, right? So that is the problem. It's like an efficiency problem. So technology will hopefully force education to change, but
Society.
But yeah, society.
So basically, the vision for this is, again, whether you see it as a triumph or you see it as an infection, capitalism is the majority of the world. Whether you're in favor of that or not, that's the state. That's the state of the matter. But the majority of countries have large capitalistic elements. Even in countries that call themselves communist or call themselves socialist, the global community has moved towards a capitalist mindset. So that will be accelerated. And now I'm not saying that it's accelerationism necessarily, but like we already see, now we're getting 2 ads on YouTube instead of just the one. And now people only watch the Super Bowl for the ads, stuff like that.
Reminds me of that quote from Ready Player One, where they're like, "Oh, we can have up to 80% of their vision like in the game, like occupied by ad space before they like have a seizure
funny.
or something."
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I remember that quote, and I was like, "Oh my god!" But yeah, it is interesting. Although I would say there's a trend of socializing more things. Like take medicine, for instance. I imagine that the U.S. will eventually, like in a few, like maybe in a decade or two, we'll probably have like a socialized medicine system. And that is just, the reason for that is basically just, if you look at the demographics based on age, the younger people, I mean, look at the Gen Zers, right? The Gen Zers are all into that. Okay. Whereas the boomers do not like that. And in 10 or 20 years, you're going to have a lot more Gen Zers voting and a lot less boomers voting. And the result of that is sort of naturally going to be the socialized medicine. Right. I believe that is going to happen. I don't think it's a matter of if, but a matter of when. I think it's become too popular of an idea to not happen. But again, I think there's,
you have to take into account, sure, maybe it is a when it will happen instead of an if. Will it sustain itself, or will it collapse? Will it collapse?
Well, it's an interesting sort of thing, because I think there's like, maybe it's something like a ladder type system where if you go far back enough, right, and there was no sort of central plumbing system. Everyone just had to get water on their own, and there was no socialized, water system or electricity. And you still have to pay for water or electricity, but it like goes through the government kind of. In America, it's weird because it's like a company that has a monopoly, but then like the government's involved. It's
Mm.
a weird sort of mixture, um, but again, like, or say, emergency services too, like firefighters. The firefighters usually, you don't get charged for that or for calling the police, right? We have socialized firefighting and police systems, and that just seems natural. Very few people would argue against that, other than
Yeah.
like anarcho-capitalists. So, um, I think in the future, you could see a lot more medical procedures becoming socialized. But at the same time, again, we're talking about like incredible life extension technologies. So I think that the newer technologies might not be guaranteed. So it's like 50 years in the future, people would say like, oh, you need like a new kidney. Okay, we do that for free, but you're not going to get like the anti-aging medicine. You got to pay for that. Stuff like that. Like if you want cybernetic enhancements, you have to pay for that. Um, just because of the sort of like step ladder of civilization kind of thing, where it's like before, it's like everyone is responsible for their own security. You can't have any expectation that you can be safe. But now we're like, okay, we will provide a police force to the public for free, and a firefighting force to the public for free. So I believe that there will come a point in the future where certain medical procedures are provided for free, whereas more advanced ones that will come into existence will not be for free. That's sort of my interpretation of it. What do you think?
Yeah, man, and it's tough again because this is all the prediction game, and it can
True.
get very convoluted very fast. So all we have to
Yeah,
kind of rely on is history, but even
pretty much.
then, you can take the Gilded Age for example. Gilded Age was followed right up after with the progressive movement of Teddy Roosevelt and other heroes, and so right now, um, I've heard a lot of arguments that right now we are in another Gilded Age with the rise of not technically monopolies, but I mean, are you gonna use Bing? Like that we're kind of in that in
Yeah,
that pool. We're kind of in that neighborhood. So
I would call them monopolies.
looking at historical times, that means that a progressive movement is going to emerge. Now,
Interesting.
like you said,
It already kind of has, but
well, exactly like you said. The thing is that what what needs to happen is we get a progressive president. Um,
hmm,
I that's again that's I don't want to throw my own personal thing in there, but
hmm,
looking at his track record and looking at his policies, Biden is very socially progressive, but we still have yet to see how he's going to deal with large corporations, if he's going to try and
hmm,
increase antitrust laws, stuff like that. So I would
hmm,
say, for the sake of the progressive era, if right now this is a new Gilded Age, for the new
hmm.
progressive era that is would arguably inevitably follow, I would say it would be someone much more focused on busting trusts, like Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, it is really interesting because in the Gilded Age and then after, that progressive movement was actually like concerned with the monopolies, whereas today the main people I hear complaining about, like Google and Facebook, are conservatives,
Mm-hmm.
which is a sort of like flip
Mm-hmm.
of what you're saying here with the Gilded Age, where the Gilded Age you had like the steel companies and the railroad companies were monopolistic and abusing their workers and stuff like that. So a progressive movement rose in response, saying you can't do that.
Yeah.
But today's progressive movement is more focused on like medical industries, I guess. They're not as concerned with like internet companies. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's sort of strange in that regard,
It is.
because It's the political situation, I would say, just in terms of what the sides are, is very peculiar to me. Um,
But we
you
gotta we
know,
gotta keep on moving, or this thing's gonna be
yeah, yeah,
five
yeah. Okay,
hours
okay.
long.
I'm just gonna.
Yeah.
It probably will be. I'm just. I'm like only, but I don't. Yeah, it's actually
Do,
okay.
do you
Day
want
in the
do, do you
life.
want to make it a two-parter?
Let's see. We
We
could make it a
we could make it a two-parter.
two. Yeah, we should probably make it two-parter. Okay, let's do Kardashev 2
Yeah.
and then go.
Then we'll call it at Kardashev
Um,
2? Sure. Or like after we do
okay,
Kardashev 2.
we'll do
We'll
Kardashev
do
2.
All right, we'll do Kardashev 2.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So,
Day in
day
the
in the
life.
life.
I forgot
Yeah.
about this image.
Yeah, surfing, air surfing.
So yeah, air surfing.
So
This
yeah.
is from Cyberpunk 2099.
Mm-hmm.
2099. I keep saying 2099. 2077. That's the
Yes.
title of the game. Now I'm getting myself confused. Cyberpunk 2077. I don't know where I got 2099 from. That's not a game. Um, that's not what Project Red, I think that's the title of the developers. That's not the game they made. But Cyberpunk is, and again, 2077 is still not to the estimate of when we would hit it. 2099 is actually closer. But still with those kind of hyper capitalist elements, but
Mm-hmm.
with much more social freedom. In Cyberpunk, you can customize yourself in so many different ways. You can
Yeah.
present
I've
yourself. Yeah, you've seen footage. You
Yeah.
can present yourself in so many different ways. There's an entire new field of jobs. People that things right now we wouldn't consider jobs being jobs. Lot of connection to the internet. Like the Internet of Things is just so much more increased and out there. You get all of this going on. And I do think that is kind of the trend. Again, like you said, a lot of Gen Z is more left leaning than right leaning.
Mm-hmm.
We still have to see if that trend continues as we age.
Yeah. That's
Um,
true. Well, it is interesting because relatively speaking, Gen Z is actually more right leaning than you would expect, just based on historical trends.
sure, yeah,
Um, However, it's Gen Z is about the same as millennial right now.
yeah.
Um,
Are
and
we millennials
yeah,
or Gen Z? I think we're Gen Z. Like, we're right on the middle
I usually determine it as the year 2000
because it's
being
the end
the,
of the millennium.
yeah, but other people put Gen Z starting as far back as 1996, and other people put it starting as far late as 2004. So I just go with 2000. And either way, we would be just on the cusp in Gen Z if 2004 is the starting.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
yeah, from what we've seen with our own generation,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna be interesting to see what people think when they grow up, what sticks, who
Mm.
goes into politics, leaders that arise, stuff like that. But I do think that
Yeah.
social progress is, from what we've seen, it is the number one focus, with economic reform being second. Yeah, there's still massive calls,
Yeah, that is true.
massive calls for socialized healthcare, for other leftist policies on finance, leftist views of finance and of
Mm-hmm.
budgeting. But the number one call has been for social equality, and I think that's going to remain. I think that is definitely going to ring true as we age, and that's going to be the main focus of the members of our generation that go into politics.
Yeah, and I think the greatest shift is probably just going to be in the shift of societal attitudes,
Absolutely.
um, rather than the shift in like legislation. Because at this point, um, technically speaking, there are no like discriminatory laws anymore in American society, but that doesn't mean that the implementation, like, there's no law that explicitly discriminates against any group of people.
Well,
However,
there are a couple.
what
Um,
like what? I,
it's not in the way that you would think,
mhm.
but
Well, that disproportionately affect a group of people, right?
well, what comes to my mind is just because I was just talking about this is stuff like
Hmm.
the gay panic defense,
Oh yeah.
how that's been
Hmm.
used to equip people of murder because they were um, put into a state of quote unquote emotional distress about
Yeah,
another
but I read
person's.
I read about that, and I thought that wasn't a thing
It is a
anymore.
thing. It's
Mhm.
completely still a thing. In some states, it's not
Okay.
allowed, or just simply won't
Yeah.
fly. But
Hmm.
stuff like that is
I guess
legal.
it depends on the jury,
You
right?
know, conversion
Yeah.
camps are still legal in a
Okay.
lot of states. So I wouldn't go as
All
far
right.
to say
Fair enough.
that there are no anti-discrimin. I would say that obviously we have rights acts. Absolutely,
Hmm.
that's a game changer. Um,
Hmm.
but
Okay, I would say at
yeah,
least it's more like not the government doing it anymore. It's more like private
it's more
enterprise
state by
doing it.
state. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Um, yeah,
But
but I would say that it would probably be more cultural value shifting more
mhm,
than anything would be the more massive change in society would be my guess, and the laws tend to reflect that. What is it? Didn't someone say like what politics is downstream from culture? Have you ever heard that?
yeah, yeah,
I'm not sure who
yeah.
said that, but I've
I
heard
know what you're talking about there.
it. And so I think I just look at the cultural shifts as the sort of determining factor here. And it's just a matter of age demographics, I think. Because if you look at the older generations alive right now versus the younger generations alive right now, and just given the progression of time, it is only natural that cultural shifts will occur in a
Mm,
certain direction. Basically, the attitudes of the young will become the attitudes of society because the young will become the old, the young will become the parents, right? Of the new young, it shifts
yeah,
like that, right? Um, the values of each generation kind of dies with that generation.
yeah.
Um, so yeah.
But yeah, day in the life. That's it's going to be a lot more progressive. But you're probably gonna see a lot more ads.
Yes.
Kardashev 2.
Yep. So this is a solar or stellar civilization. If we look at domain here, we've got a Dyson sphere. I like that. Oh, look at this. I love this picture. They are like tearing up this planet in
Yeah.
the bottom left.
Ooh,
I like to think that's Mercury.
planet cry. You hate that planet, don't you?
I don't hate it. No, I love Mercury. I am glad that it is there as
Mm-hmm.
a convenient source of metal to build a Dyson sphere. That's all it is. That's
That's
all it
all it
is.
is. That's all it is.
That is all it is useful for. I'm very glad that Mercury is there and is what it is. Because if it were a planet that were like Mars, for instance, people would be like, no, you can't because there might be like bacteria there. There might be alien life. There is no chance that there's alien life on Mercury. No one is going to shed a tear over like strip mining Mercury. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas you'll get like people for Venus and Mars, there's going to be a ton of like, oh, you can't. I'm like, oh, shut up. Like, I love in one of my favorite book series, the Mars trilogy, Kim
Yeah.
Stanley Robinson. You've got this group of people that call themselves the Reds. They're not
Can we get a
communists.
compilation of every
Of
time
how many
you
times I say
brought
that,
up
yeah. I
Kim
bring up that
Stanley
book. It's a
Robbins?
really good. It's a good book. It's a
Yeah, I
good
know.
series of books.
I'm not knocking you for it. I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah,
it's
yeah.
funny.
Well, but so it's about Mars, and so you have this like political group called the Reds, and again, not communists.
Hmm.
They are red because they are anti-terraformation of Mars, and they want Mars to be like kept as it is. And whenever these people are like, whenever they do something, like whenever they succeed in that book, I'm like, stop. I don't like them. I'm a green, as they say. Um, yeah, whenever like the Reds do anything in the Mars trilogy, I'm like, why?
Mm.
Stop. Because it just seems anti-progress to me. I think space ought to. It's one of the characters that's a green. The main green essentially is this guy Saxifrage Russell, and he makes this argument that it is like the duty to expand life throughout the universe. And I'm like, oh yeah, Saxifrage Russell, that is, I agree with that. You know, it is the moral obligation. You know what I mean? Like, it is moral. It is inherently moral to spread life. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So terraforming Mars will create a new domain for life, and that is moral. Keeping Mars red is going to prevent life from existing, so it is immoral. What do you think? Would you be a red or a green if you were a colonist on Mars?
Would I be a red or a green? Well, I would create the third party.
Mm-hmm. You would be the blues eventually.
Yeah, I guess.
They are the like. Oh, that's interesting. They're like half terraform, half areaform.
Mm-hmm.
Area meaning something Mars-like, so it's like as we terraform Mars, we must also areaform ourselves and meet in the middle.
Mm.
That's the third philosophy that gets reached by the end of the book.
I don't know. I'd have to look more into it. Look at which political figures stand out to me from each party.
Yeah, it's really nice. Like the main, like the leaders of the leader of the Reds and Greens initially hate each other, and by the end of the third book, they're like together romantically, and so it's like, oh, that's nice. And then they form the Blue Party, and they're like, we're Praxis.
I never thought I'd die fighting side by side with a red.
Yeah, exactly.
What about side by side?
It's such a sweet ending. It's such a nice ending. I love that book.
Oh, we got our first fog check.
Oh, we have chat. Fog check.
And fog check.
Troop. Oh, we don't have chat. I thought you were going to say chat, but all right. There we go. Anyway, so domain.
You're still stuck in place, but
we'll
see if that clears up.
I guess it's not working. It's too foggy. So domain is a solar system.
Mm-hmm.
The Dyson Sphere. I love the Dyson Sphere. Book 3, heavy Dyson Sphere. Book 3, the first like 10 or 11 chapters take place in the Dyson Sphere. So if you want Dyson Sphere, book 3, get it. It's exciting. Dude, I freaking love Dyson Spheres. Oh my god. I couldn't even like initially when I was thinking of making like the third book, I wanted the third book to like fully describe a Dyson Sphere. It did not go in that direction. It still takes place in the Dyson Sphere, but again, the Dyson Sphere is just way too massive to fully like appreciate its glory, right? Mm-hmm. If you had like an atlas, right? If you tried to make an atlas of a Dyson Sphere and it's like every, land area the size of the United States got one page on the atlas, like I think that would take like it would be ridiculously large. Like let's see actually I'll do the calculations in the background. You can talk.
All right,
talk about something.
All right. Yeah. So I, as an American, I live in America, and as a person who lives in America, I am an American. Mm-hmm. And as an American, the Dyson Sphere is super cool, and it's gonna cost a lot to make, but I was thinking about starting a GoFundMe for the construction of a Dyson Sphere. If you want to pitch in, please do links in the description, and we should just start that and see if we can. I mean. It's definitely going towards this Dyson Sphere, not anything else. And
yeah, totally.
If we can make a Dyson Sphere even around the sun, because like sunlight, it's kind of overrated. I haven't tasted sunlight in about 6 months now. Sure, my legs have atrophied. Fine. Okay, sometimes I can feel my heartbeat in my eyes. Okay. Yes, I might have the complexity of a sheet of paper, but it's All right, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
You don't need sunlight.
So if you were to write an atlas,
Yes.
so a book, like a tour guide book, and every piece of land area on a Dyson sphere that had the same, land area as the United States, right? If each United States land area got one page in this atlas, the atlas would have to be 28 billion pages long
Damn.
to describe the entire Dyson sphere. I bow.
Dune, but Frank Herbert.
Yes. I mean, this thing is ridiculously large. It is unfathomably large compared to modern society, even compared to a Kardashev 1 civilization.
Yeah.
It is like, there is no comparison here. Like, it's ridiculous. I love it when in space movies, like, the humans fight off the aliens. I'm like, no, okay. Because if you think about it, like, wars on Earth, at most, right, in terms of, like, outnumbering, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine there was a war where you had, like, say, a 10-to-1 ratio of population or population of soldiers and the, like, outnumbered people won, right? Like, these are very extreme scenarios. You never really get something more than that, right? Mm-hmm. And so it is utter folly to assume that you could fight off an alien civilization that is possibly, like, many factors up the Kardashev scale above you. Because, like, presumably, I would say at most you could fight off a civilization that is 0.1 above you. That's at the absolute most. And that would be fighting a brutal guerrilla warfare campaign like the Viet Cong, right? That is like your scenario, war of attrition type thing, because the power levels here are unmatched. The amount of, like, energy at your disposal is supposedly, like, roughly equivalent to population numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have a civilization that is a Kardashev 2, I think I did the calculations. It's like 1 sextillion. 1 sextillion people could be supported, which is 10 to the power of 21 people could be supported by a Dyson sphere. So, yeah, good luck fighting off 10 to the 21 people.
Yeah.
The U.S., how many does the U.S. have? Let's see. Because, so the U.S. has, how many soldiers does the U.S.? Maybe a few million at most. It's sort of divided among the branches here, the statistics that I have. So it's like, I can't get it. But say it's 1% of our population, right? A few million. If a Kardashev 2 civilization were to have 1% of its population as soldiers, that would be 10 to the 19 people, which is 10 billion times as many people, well, more like 1 billion times as many people as are alive on Earth. So Earth versus Kardashev 2 civilization, right? We would be, every single human on Earth would be outnumbered 1 billion to 1 from just their soldiers alone.
Damn.
So they could have a standing army that's like 1/1,000,000th of their population, which would be like the US having 300 total soldiers, right?
Yeah.
So that's the same proportion. So if Kardashev 2, only 1/1,000,000th of their population is in the army, that would give them 10 to the 15 soldiers, which would be roughly 10,000 times the population of modern-day Earth. So whenever a ragtag band of humans fight off the alien invaders in any movie, I'm just like, yeah, okay, sure, all right, buddy. Nah, that is not going to happen. Putting it here first, folks. Make peace with the aliens. You must. It is the only... Resistance is futile, right? It is the only way to succeed, is to be friendly to the aliens. Hopefully they'll give you good terms. Otherwise, you're just going to be utterly destroyed. But yeah, so capabilities of a Kardashev 2 civilization. They could totally Alderaan a planet They could build a planet from scratch. They could terraform a planet, and they would probably have eternal life, I would guess, just from all the technology they have. Um, Look at that Ouroboros. Everyone loves a good Ouroboros, right?
Everyone likes the Ouroboros.
Yeah. If you don't like Ouroboroses, do you even have a soul?
Unsubscribe.
No, don't. I will accept the. Maybe they have. What's the phobia of snakes? Whatever. You're on thin ice, but I'll tolerate
what is
it.
the phobia of snakes? What did
I think it's
Indiana
like
Jones have?
something phobia.
Odontophobia.
Yeah, let's go with that.
It
Probably
is
not bad. Okay,
ophidiophobia.
yeah. I knew it started with an O. That's anyway. But yeah, so um again, if you concentrated all of the sunlight on the Earth would be vaporized in like an hour, and you could blow it apart in like a week, which is actually a surprisingly long amount of time.
Hmm.
But that's just down to gravitational binding energy, which is the amount of energy it would require to completely dissociate all the particles of some gravitationally bounded object. Then you've got, of course, the creation of shell worlds, and the way that you do that is with support structures plus some central quantity of mass, possibly like a miniature black hole, Kugelblitz, the Kugelblitz black hole. That could be something that these societies create for energy as well as just gravitational prowess. And then, of course, you can terraform a planet. Terraforming a planet, if you can create a planet from scratch, you can terraform one. And then eternal life, it just sort of makes sense. We were talking about life extension before. That's just the natural conclusion. Yeah. Actually, I think we could maybe finish this up. I don't know. We should probably end after.
Let's make it a two-parter.
Yeah.
Everyone loves a good
we'll
two-parter. Come on.
Everyone loves yeah. All right. Okay, so then technology. Or wait, do you have anything to say about capabilities?
Yeah. Among Us 2? Question mark? Anyways, technology.
Yeah, so they would bum 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 bum. So technology. We got massive computer like storage space that they could probably have AI that are as intelligent as humans. They could probably field interstellar trips and create like very good virtual realities. So interstellar voyages, you can send an interstellar ship off using a light sail. We talked about that last episode. Just the immense power of a Dyson sphere, you can direct light at some sort of interstellar ship, and that will actually accelerate it to relativistic velocities. Mm-hmm. And then you can get it to another star in a few years. And then, yeah, just the massive computer power. Again, the Fugaku supercomputer, 442 petaflops. And it takes, an entire like warehouse facility. With the improvement of technology, I mean, it's commonly said that the computers that they used to do Apollo 11 that took up an entire room had less computing power than modern day cellular phones. And so imagine if that trend holds. Imagine if today's supercomputers in 50 years are phone-sized. I would very much like that. Imagine having a Fugaku in your pocket.
Yeah.
Like 442 petaflops. That is a lot of energy, or not energy, but calculations. And so, yeah, eventually there's going to be AI, and there's going to have to be AI rights. Here's the thing. Any AI that is smart as a human is just another citizen. Like, people don't think about this, but, like, when you send, like, an unmanned journey somewhere, the AI is just algorithms, so it's actually unmanned. But if you were to have, like, an AI that is as smart as a human, it is not unmanned anymore. Any AI that is as smart as a human deserves human rights. That is what I would say. Well, it's just natural. It just naturally. Well, because I would guess actually that the first AI will be former humans that have gone
Oh
and
yeah,
digitized their
yeah.
brains,
That's
right?
probably true. Yeah.
There will likely be some like artificial intelligence, like I don't know how you say it, like double A, double A intelligences, right?
Yeah.
Double versus just AIs. AIs, how about human? I'm trying to think of good acronyms
You're
here.
just scared of Rocco's basilisk, aren't you?
No, I'm not. I
Yeah,
am
you
not
are.
afraid of Rocco's.
Yeah, you're afraid of Rocco's
Uh,
basilisk.
no, I am not.
Yeah, you are.
I I personally, I want to be digitized.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do it. Being human, not fun. Let me just tell you. Uh, I'm putting it out there.
I
I'm
want to
putting it out
quote you
there.
on
Okay.
that. I want to throw that in like a quote book or
I
something.
have okay. I like so like a month ago, right? The last time I clipped my toenails, right? I like didn't get to the edge, right? And so now it's freaking growing into like the side of my toe, right? That's just a medical condition. I mean, not a condition, but like that's a thing that people have to deal with, ingrown toenails.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to deal with that if you're a freaking computerized intelligence. You're just like beep boop.
That is
I
definitely
am a
an
pure.
argument.
That is it's annoying. It's annoying to be human. Being human is to be uncomfortable, like greater than 50% of the time. Right now, I'm tired. My eyes feel heavy. Right, it's slightly too hot in here because like human is so temperamental. Right, it's annoying. It is not fun to be a human.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, as soon as the maybe not as soon as the but like when the opportunity presents itself and it's proven safe, like I'm not going to be the Wright brothers here. You don't want to take the first voyage. Um, I mean, I think Charles Lindbergh was the first to cross the Atlantic on a plane solo, but like the 10 people that tried before him all died. So yeah, I'll wait. I'll wait.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to be the first one to do it. But once it's available, and I've determined it's safe. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm totally doing that. So many people are like opposed to that. And I'm like, whatever, dude. Give up your pretensions. They're all like, oh, to be human. Shut up. Shut up, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is not anything special to be a human. It's not a particularly good design. I'm just going to say. Like all the people that are creationists, I'm like, wouldn't the creator make a better design? This is a pretty bad design. Humans have horrible back problems, for instance, and that is just evolution. That is just the natural result of evolution. The greatest evidence, in my opinion, for evolution is that the human body sucks. Because if it were created by someone, they would have to be sadistic to create it like this.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is my rant about.
That is your rant.
I reject my humanity.
Return to monkey.
No, advanced to computer.
Advanced to computer.
Yeah, so that gets into like virtual reality stuff.
Yeah, 100%.
Virtual reality would be cool. Everyone, you know how people are said to have like a happy place? Imagine if your happy place was like an actual place, like it was like a server you had, where it's like you get home from work and it's a tough day and you're like, oh, I got to go to my happy place, and like you like plug in or whatever to the like matrix or whatever, right? And you just like lay back and then you're like in your zen zone and you're like, this is so peaceful.
Tell me this wasn't
very happy.
Tell me this isn't the most like BoJack Horseman interaction / bit that I've ever had. This just seems like something that would fit very well into BoJack Horseman's style of humor. You just made me remember it. So, yesterday or the day before, I think it was the day before, it was, I was on call with a couple of my friends, and basically we were doing this bit where one of them was making this claim that I was very opposed against, so I was like in distress, was basically the bit. And I like closed my eyes and I was like rubbing my temples and stuff like that. And I'm just like, I gotta go to my happy place. And they were like, oh, are you in your happy place? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, oh, so you're in. And then they say what my actual happy place is because I've talked about it a decent amount. I'm like, yes. Oh, great. Now you're here.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, great. Yep. That's almost like a quote. Yeah.
That seems very
From the show,
reminiscent
it
of
feels
that.
like.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
started
exactly.
rewatching it. I'm on like episode 8.
Nice.
But
Yeah, I've
yeah,
rewatched it a few times.
yeah, I gotta rewatch it, man. But yeah,
Yeah.
so technology.
But yeah, so technology.
Yeah,
We have
AI
technology.
increasing humans, and what we're gonna get to in the next one with Kardashev 3, 4, and 5 is stepping outside of humans because. I mean, like we said here, like eternal life is probably achievable in a Kardashev 2 society, whether it's, immunity to disease or technological immortality, like uploading yourself. So, after that, then you start going on to, how do we get places faster if we're, alive forever? Which is what we'll get into next time. But yeah, that's technology.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I'm very excited for the technology that's coming in the future.
Yeah.
I want the future tech. I don't know. People that there's a surprising amount. I find it surprising how hesitant people are about technologies. It sort of like always kind of frustrates me, I guess, because I'm just like, society has gotten better. Quality of life has increased due to technology, right? Like, you don't just assume that every trend is going to continue. More like, given history, it's almost like you'd have to prove that technology won't be good rather than prove that it will be good. You know what I'm saying? Like, given the trend of human history, it seems like people should be naturally like happy about technology and only become wary when presented with evidence to the contrary. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm not sure where the burden of proof lies in terms of that sort of argument, but like the historical trend, I'm like, do you think in 100 years that the humans alive then are going to be like, oh, I wish we were back in 2021. I
There'll
wish
be
we were
some people
back at
that
that level of
listen to the
technology.
music of.
Well, that's
This,
completely
but
different.
yeah, no,
Like,
they won't think that. No.
they won't be like, gosh, I hate having all of this technology. I'd like to die of like, heart disease.
Yeah.
Like, no, not going to happen. Just as people today aren't wishing like, dang, I really wish I could have died of tuberculosis.
Yeah.
I hate living in 2021. Like, shut up. That's sort of how I feel when I interact with like anti-technology people. I'm like, oh my God. Anyway, again, it's another one of those things I could go on about for an hour. But yeah.
Society.
So, society. Here we got Star Trek. So this is like post.
I can't believe we used that Spock and we didn't use Leonard Nimoy. We used Zachary Quinto Spock. It's fine.
Sorry.
It's fine. No, his memory lives on.
All right. So here we have a post-scarcity society, and the example is Star Trek. So once you get to a post-scarcity level of civilization, the difference between communism and capitalism is essentially non-existent because there is so much abundance that like there is no real like need, right? So it's like if everyone has like basically if everyone's living like a billionaire, or if 90% of people are living like a billionaire and then 10% are living like trillionaires, is there really a difference, like that's the thing. It's sort of interesting because people talk about like wealth inequality, and that is an issue, but you just have to be wary of the fact that it might be like, say that the quality of life of the poor increases by a factor of 10 in a given time, and then the quality of life of the rich increases by a factor of 100. Everyone's still getting better. Sure, wealth disparity is increasing in that scenario, but everyone's lives is still getting better, you know? Um, I'm not saying that that applies to today. I'm just saying that this might apply in the future, and people just have to be sort of wary of that. When like the term wealth inequality, I'm like, is this? We got to talk about actual like poverty, because just because there's a disparity does not mean that life is worse for everyone than it used to be, right? Like when people say wealth inequality has gotten worse, it makes people think that like quality of life has gotten worse, and quality of life has actually improved for everyone. It's just improved for certain people, like the rich, more than it has for the poor, which is still a like problem you can critique, but it's like it's not like things are going backward, you know. And so that is sort of why scarcity, I feel there is no real difference between economic systems, because it basically it just gets to the point where products become so abundant, and with a Dyson sphere, I mean, think of all the sunlight you could dedicate. You could build O'Neill cylinders, right, within the Dyson sphere, and you could dedicate 1% of those to farming, and you would have a severe overabundance of food, given modern population, right? 1% of Dyson sphere dedicated to food, modern population, 99% of that food would be rotting on shelves, right? Everyone would be well fed. And it's sort of the same thing with any sort of material resource or energy resource, because you have all the materials and energy you need. Anything composed of materials or energy, of matter and energy, is in ultimate abundance. The only thing you would be lacking are ideas, possibly, right? That's the only thing. But like any technology that exists, you can build, you can get it, and it would be super cheap. So the way I would imagine it, and the way that it happens in my book, the sort of transition to post-scarcity, is that, of course, the world is mostly capitalistic right now. So I sort of assume that that doesn't really change. But once you go to post-scarcity, what happens is a massive deflation. And in the third book, people are paying for things with picos. And what a pico is a picocent, which is, I think, one trillionth of a cent. I think it's even less than that. It's it's 1,000 times less than that, right? And that is their equivalent of dollars, because products have become so common that like everything has become so cheap, essentially. To like crazy overabundance. And so I did this calculation where I calculated the amount of resources that you would attain by having a Dyson sphere, and you would get this sort of massive deflation. And the result of that, right, is that if the modern dollar is equivalent to, at some point in the future, a picocent, right, then if you have a single dollar, then you can live like a multi-trillionaire, right? And so at that point, what is the difference in economic systems? Because you can, isn't there that like thing where it's like try to spend all of Bill Gates' money, like there's a website, and it's like impossible. Like,
yeah. It's like you have to buy every single team in the NFL, and then you have to buy Pepsi and Coca-Cola and
exactly.
Germany. And just stuff like
Germany,
that.
Just the nation, yeah.
The
and
nation
so
of Germany.
It's like, and so it's like, and that's just 100 billion. Not even. If you were a trillionaire or a multi-trillionaire, imagine how easy life would be for a multi-trillionaire, right? And at a point in the future where massive deflation from a massive increase in supply, which results in supply and demand, massive increase in supply by a factor of many orders of magnitude results in a decrease of price by many orders of magnitude, massive deflation, and the result is that $1 makes you a trillionaire. In that scenario, what is the difference of economics? I do not care if you put like a 99% income tax on me at that point, because I'm like, fine, whatever. I'm still like $10 billion equivalent. You know what I mean? Like that's for everyone. Um, so that is the scenario. Everyone, everyone incredibly wealthy. It's like Huey Long. You know,
Yeah.
Huey Long,
Yeah.
every man a king. This is the realization of that. Um, yeah. So anyway,
Here, hold on. And
so
that's
day in the life,
it's a million.
solar sailing.
It's a billion. We take 50 billion Big Macs to run out all of Bill Gates' money.
That would be what, like 7 per person.
Yeah. Imagine.
That's actually like that feels like very low. I mean, I know that's ridiculous, but like you could spend all
50
that money.
billion Big Macs.
No, but because that's just in terms of global humanity, right? You could feed people for like half a week, which is a lot for one person. Don't get me wrong, but it's like just kind of like a lot. Anyway, so solar sailing, daily life, solar surfing. This is just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, it's really similar to before. Daily life would be super easy. It's just ultimate leisure.
honestly, yeah, that's pretty much
No
exactly
one,
what it would be.
no one really has to work in a post-scarcity society unless they have to. Like, isn't the reason that people work in Star Trek like for prestige? Like they want prestige, like 'cause they're not really getting paid, right? Like they can have everything they want,
Well, Kirk kind of works
right?
for the government, right? I mean, he
Yeah,
and same with
but it's
Picard.
like they do it for like glory, kind of for the
Yeah,
honor.
yeah. I think that's the. I never really got into the Star Trek lore like I did,
Yeah.
um, Star Wars or
Hmm.
Lord of the Rings. I'm getting into Lord of the Rings right now. But
Nice.
yeah, I don't know. Like, why was Kirk out there?
Well, yeah, because think about it. They have those food replicators, right? Where you can just press a button and like it creates any like food that you want. This is what I'm talking about. This is post scarcity. So the only motivation to do something is because you genuinely love your work, right? Everything is passion projects because everything could be mostly automated. There's not much that needs to be done. And so the result of that is that everyone essentially lives in the
Yeah.
lap of luxury.
So this is a quote. This is a
Yeah.
quote from Picard in First
Hmm.
Contact about the matter. Uh, quote, the acquisition of wealth is no longer the driving force of our lives. We work to better ourselves and the rest of humanity. End quote. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
progressing humanity and just I guess exploring stuff because they were finding new species and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just you do stuff because you want to.
Yep. That's exactly what it is. Ultimate like free will at this point.
And honestly,
Ultimate
for the people
yeah.
out there that say, "Oh, if there's no scarcity, if there's none of that, then people are just going to sit around doing nothing." And I would say the people that sit around doing nothing are those that wanted to do nothing.
Yeah.
If you have infinite
Exactly.
freedom, you are going to do what you want to do. So if you do
Yep.
end up sitting around doing nothing, then that is truly what you want to do, or you're just not motivated
Yeah,
enough.
exactly. Exactly. I mean,
But
again,
by your
I do not
friends,
understand
yeah.
the like suffering is good crowd. I'm like, oh my god. It's like worse than the anti-technology crowd. I mean, it's just an extension of the same concept, but it's just sort of this human resistance to change, like, oh, things have always been this way, therefore they must remain that way. And I'm like, okay, go back 100, 200 years and the things that had always been that way were horrifying today. And if you were to suggest bringing them back, everyone rightfully be like, you are an evil individual, right? Like think of any institution. Like things were not good 100, 200 years ago for a lot of people. Things really were bad. I mean, you could go to the feudalist system. things have been like that for thousands of years. If you were to say we should bring back feudalism, everyone would be like, no, we're not going to do that. That is stupid. Why would we do that? So it's just it just feels exactly the same to me. Like from a futuristic perspective, if 100 or 200 years from now, someone were to say we should go back to how things were in 2021, the general consensus, everyone would say, no, that's ridiculous. That's horrifying. Why would you want to do that? Like there's this sort of tendency to romanticize the past. I even get that too, because the 80s aesthetic, right, is fun. But you don't actually want to live in the 80s generally.
Yeah, probably not.
Even the 80s, which is relatively close to the present. I would not want to actually live in the 80s. I like the, music, and I like the sort of aesthetic, the vibe, but like that's just kind of the zeitgeist, right? That's just pop culture. Like you don't actually want to live in that time period. A ton of curable diseases would be not curable.
And social stuff also wasn't the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Technologies weren't available.
Yep. Like, and the Cold War was ramping down, but like that's not the best.
Hide under your desk.
Yep, exactly. And then if you go back to like the 50s, right? The 50s is basically every 3 decades are romanticized the most, except for the 2010s. The 2010s, for some reason, fell flat. But like the 1980s, the 1950s, and the 1920s, like it's really interesting. The politicians of the 1950s harkened back to the 1920s, saying like, "Oh, I'm gonna make things like the 1920s again," right? Politicians in the 1980s, particularly Reagan, is like, oh, we're going to bring back things like in the 50s. And then in the 2010s, you have politicians like, it's this sort of 30-year cycle, which is interesting. But
well, because I guess that's what they grew up with, because like the average age of a politician is like 40.
That's also the nostalgia cycle in just marketing.
Yeah.
So that's why 80s nostalgia was very popular in the 2010s.
Yes.
70s nostalgia was actually incredibly popular in the knots, I guess.
The knots. Yeah, I've taken to calling them the knots, actually.
Yeah. I think the knots or the aughts. I don't know which one.
I would say
knots or aughts.
Knots.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. And so even in the 90s had a lot of 60s nostalgia. Although there is some, like now we would move into like 90s nostalgia, but there's a problem in that the zeitgeist has sort of unraveled. It started unraveling in like the 90s.
Mm.
So where is the nostalgia? We have run out of nostalgia, right? Which is just a fascinating problem for marketing. But like that is why Stranger Things came out in the 2010s. You know what I mean? It's this 30-year cycle.
Yeah.
If it came out in the noughts, it would be a show about like the 70s, like that is just the cycle. It's the marketing. But yeah, so again, the past sucks, right?
Mm-hmm.
The future is glorious. So to suggest not
literally that 70s show came out from 1998 to 2006.
There you go. It's the nostalgia cycle, right?
Yeah.
That's just how it is. And it wasn't Happy Days like a show in the 70s that took place in the 50s.
Which one?
Happy Days, spelled like D-A-Z-E. Have you heard of that?
Happy Day. I have not. Yeah.
Am I getting the title wrong?
No. Set in 1950s Milwaukee. Yeah, and that was made 1974 to 1984. So yeah.
Huh. Yeah. Interesting. Oh, it is spelled correctly, huh?
Yeah.
I always remembered it being spelled incorrectly. Anyway, but the point is, right? The Mandela effect. Yes, I'm actually from an alternate reality. No, I just have a poor memory. Not even a memory, because I never even watched this show. I've just heard about it, right? Because I was not a child in the 70s. But it's just interesting. So yeah, people, the message here, I guess, is that daily life, quality of life will continue to improve generally throughout the future. Um, that is the most likely scenario. And so it is incredibly foolish to romanticize the past. And romanticizing the present is also foolish, right? Like saying that, oh, the future is going to be bad, we don't want technology, it is just the exact same thing as saying, oh, the past was better than the present, which objectively it was not. Like, it's just shifted temporally. You know what I mean? Like the arguments that the anti-technology people and the like the pro-human suffering people,
Mm-hmm.
like the builds character, like shut up. Like those kinds of people today, if you were to make those same arguments in 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, it would be just as ridiculous as someone today suggesting bringing back all of the horrible things that happened in the past 200 years of human history, right? So it's like, it just perplexes me, I guess. But anyway, we're gonna go to final thoughts because this has gone too long.
Yeah. Yeah. So
We'll
yeah,
go through the
we'll
other
split this into a two-parter. So next week
two-parter.
we will, or we don't even
Yeah,
necessarily need to do it next week, but I'm guessing that's what we will do.
we should probably do it
Yeah.
next week.
So
Yeah.
next week we will.
We'll talk about it after the stream.
Yeah. And so
Okay.
next week we'll be
Yeah.
covering Kardashev 3, 4, and 5, also called Kardashev Omega. And that's when we start
Pretty
getting
much
into
just
some
anything greater.
some really
Weird
crazy stuff.
Yep.
So that's going to be super
But
fun
yeah.
and all that. But yeah, let me skip on over to final thoughts. But I don't want to spoil too much. So there we go.
Yeah. So in conclusion,
Yeah, in conclusion,
my conclusion
yeah,
is the future is going to be better than the present. And I hope for the future to come as fast as possible, as quick as possible. I am completely pro progression.
Yeah,
that's my stance.
Future is bright. Future is bright. As you see, the first advancements that are going to be made are with just general society, more progressivism, stuff like that, as well as just humans in general. The first priority is going to be humans, building ourselves up with technology, some more body modification, lasting longer, possible technological immortality at a stage 2 on the Kardashev. Stuff like that. That's going to be the main focus, is improving our own capabilities. And going into the higher Kardashevs, it's going to be improving the capabilities of the rest of everything else.
Yeah, and I would like to add, a lot of the technologies are not actually linked to Kardashev level. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of confusing because, technically, I mean, you could imagine, right? Say a civilization that has like all the technologies unlocked, right? But then somehow they all like nuke themselves or something, right? And like everything collapses except like one guy survives. That guy still has, all the technologies, but it's not like he's going to be using that much energy, right? Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So some of this stuff is like Dyson spheres are related to capacity. Basically, the capabilities slides and the domain slides were generally the ones that are more like intrinsically linked to Kardashev development. The technology slides are the one that we just see as the most likely like path, but it could occur before or after. That's just the caveat to add. But yeah.